But anyway, so I kind of feel like Marietta already answered that question. Is Mr. Kennebec here? Yes, wonderful. Our poor department heads, you know, hey, French, thank you. Here come roof questions, Dr. K. In looking at the budget, the visitor center roof is estimated at, between two different funding streams, about 150 grand. I'm presuming I'm correct. And I'm just wondering what the square footage is on that visitor center roof, and is, you know, how did we come to that number? There's no doubt it needs to be fixed, Steve. But how did we get to that number of 150 Gs?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, Council, that is an estimate. It's not anything we have from a quote that I'm aware of. I think we may have one quote from the company that put on the roof on the TCA. The square footage I don't have off the top of my head, but I do have it in my office. It's a best guess estimate by Julie Scansey and myself. Julie's been a contractor for 30 years here in Taos. She's been at this a while. She's
tops.
Pretty good at doing this. Now, what we have found is that over just the last couple of years, the costs of materials for roofing have gone up significantly. So the roof we put on the TCA for $109,000 last year might cost us a lot more than that this year.
109 for the TCA last year?
Yes, sir.
And you said it might cost us?
It's a moving target. The costs go up significantly, depending on the type of the roof material, depending on whether the bonding is necessary, depending on the condition of the roof that you take off. So there's a lot of variables. So what you have from us is an estimate. We try to go high so that we're not under, that when we do get quotes, that we don't end up with needing more money than we budgeted. We came very close with the TCA roof. We were right within $5,000, I think, or less from our estimate from the actual cost.
So what I hear you saying then, Steve, is, look, Fritz, this is a guesstimate. We know we need the roof. We're guesstimating on it. And my question would be, how many square feet are up there?
Well, I have that in my office, but I don't have it on the top of my head.
Okay.
One thing I will say, they vary. We've had a lot of people look at that roof, a lot of professional roofers, and we get such swings on what it'll cost that until we put a scope of work together, what it is exactly we want, and until that time comes and the cost of materials are available, it's really hard to nail down.
Right. Similar questions with the El Pueblo roof.
Right.
Square footage, how'd we get to 110K on that job?
That's the same method of
Guesstimating right now.
Right. So the square footage, if you recall, I sent an email out after the first budget meeting we had, and in that email, you'll have the square footage and the estimates for the roofs we thought are in the worst condition. But once we're done here, I can go to my office and I can pull that up.
Well, you're pretty busy, but I imagine as we go through the process, you're going to be coming to us with exact dimensions, and we'll be able to hammer out, hopefully, savings, and yet get the job done right.
Once the money's in the budget, what we'll do is we'll go forward with RFPs through finance and procurement.
Thanks, Steve. And then the Youth and Family Center at $100,000, and of course, here's the stories I've heard. 500, 750,000, and they're just stories. And then I heard a thought of, well, we're just going to put some real high-grade dehumidifiers, my term, up there. What's going on with the Youth and Family Center? Is $100,000? What's $100,000 going to do?
That's not even get you started. The $100,000, my understanding is that's the money that's available to put into the capital fund for that project for this year. But we're going to need a lot more than $100,000. Again, it's an issue of you get one expert up to look at it, and they'll tell you from their perspective that it's the the moisture coming from the inside of the building and damaging the roof material from
Right.
inside out.
Right.
You get another specialist in, and they'll tell you it's something else. What we need to first do on the Youth and Family Center is identify the problem, find out what's really wrong, and then fix it. I mean, we might waste a lot of money trying to fix things we think are wrong with it. So my suggestion would be to get an engineering firm in and have them assess the building and the roof, so that we know, is the moisture causing the roof damage coming from outside or from within? I've heard both things. So $100,000 though, that's not going to get us very far at all.
It's a down payment.
Yes, sir.
What I want to add to that is that there's a number of these areas, like the road maintenance, this roof, that we know the full amount that we need is not in there. But again, if we don't start putting money away, we're never going to have it, because there's never going to be a spare $1 million laying around. So the idea is to create the line item and to start channeling money toward it.
Right. And I'm going to guess, I heard you say we need to get an engineering firm in there to really determine what's going on.
Right.
Not only do you have fantastic expertise, but Miss Julie is pretty awesome. With your adept eyes and hers, you still feel like we need to get an engineering firm
Well,
in there?
I do,
drop
because
another 10,000 on?
It'll probably be more than that.
Yeah, great.
Only because there's very specialized equipment for example, and understand we're talking about 3 different roofs for the Youth and Family Center. There's the pool
Yeah,
roof,
right.
the roof connecting the pool to the Youth and Family Center activity area, and then the ice rink roof. And they're different types of roofs, and they have
Right.
different problems that are wrong with them. And with the swimming pool roof, there are serious issues. There's something wrong with it, that equipment that's there to take the humidity out of the pool area. And so we've heard both that it's moisture coming from inside of the pool that's causing the damage to the roof, but we also heard that it's water from outside. And they're probably both correct.
Great.
But until we fix and know for sure that the humidity controlling equipment is working properly, to take the roof off or making repairs to it would just be money thrown away, because until we know that problem is fixed, we're not certain that we're spending good money by roof repairs.
Huh. Okay.
It's a complicated problem, and
Yeah.
it was built before I got here, and there's been conjecture that the buildings were built improperly and the roofs weren't pitched correctly, and so we really need to get to the bottom of it.
Right.
One second, Commissioner. Have you guys determined if the dehumidifier system is working properly?
No, sir. I don't know if Brian Greer is here, but there's a lot of people that have looked at it, kind of kicked the tires. The folks that have been working on it most recently say, yeah, it's working fine. But if you just walk into that pool.
Right, I have, but I just curious.
So
Nobody's
no
determined
isn't
that.
the answer. And
Okay.
we have actually had through French, we identified an engineering company, and they came and took a look at it. The company that put it in or is maintaining this also take a look at it, and they've been talking with Brian and Julie mostly. But I don't think we've had a definitive answer yet about it. It's working, it's operating. If you go in there, you hear it, you see it, but I don't think it's working correctly. No, sir.
You know,
Go ahead, and then we'll go.
Well, just real quick, Mr. Mayor, the
Okay.
question I had was with regards to the roofs, specifically at the visitor center. Rick, as we start to move down this highway of creating the historic district and whatnot, I know we've talked about dumping excess inventory of buildings that the town is responsible for upkeeping and whatnot. But, my question being is that as we move forward, could we not find an operator of that visitor center to take over that building as well? And I'm looking within the realms of saying arts and cultural district, everybody housed, anything involved with tourism housed within that one building. Just thinking outside the box of us continually having to maintenance something that, generally the entire area benefits from.
Yes to your question. Yeah, I mean, in some communities, the Chamber of Commerce runs the visitor center, or you have a visitors bureau, or one of the things we're going through in this whole process of meeting with the Tourism Council and the marketing groups and the Lodgers Association may be that, and John's not here, but I've had that discussion with him, it may be that the Lodgers Association really wants to do that, expand their role, and we shouldn't be in the marketing business at all. They should just get a small contribution from us to do that and raise the money from the community. So it's certainly something we can look at.
So Steve, thank you for your efforts, and Miss Julie's awesome. Next one's coming your way, Miss Martha. As I go through this budget, $55,000 for legal publications regarding annexation. What does that mean?
We need to do the public hearing process, so we need to legally advertise 15 days in advance, so that's putting in the legal ads and giving public notice primarily.
But I thought we were done annexing.
Well, we have the annexation, but then we have to zone those lands that have been annexed.
What I would urge you, Councilman, is to look at this as an investment. We're currently not collecting the town's percentage of the property tax on these annexations, because in meeting with the assessor, she has made the assumption that because it is not zoned, therefore she does not know what the value of it would be to the town. So the county is actually, well, I wouldn't say they're collecting the money. We're not collecting our portion of the money. But we have asked for a procedure where if we proceed by November to actually conduct the hearings and and I'll defer to council on this too, but from my knowledge on the county side of it, when you zone the property, the state law requires that you actually serve notice to the individual. If we were doing the entire town, we could just do a publication. And it has to be first-class mail.
Return receipt.
You have to get a return receipt if you want to prove that you actually did it, because half the people will show up and say, I didn't get it, which is true, because they have a mortgage and it goes to the bank or it goes to a family or something. So we want to be able to defend that zoning in case it's challenged later. But getting that zoning in place will then allow us to collect the property taxes on that property. So look at it as money in, as an investment to get us money back in January when the county assessor certifies her values on the property, and that how much of that should come to the town.
And all of that makes perfect sense, but does any of this involve the Foothills Neighborhood Association?
No, I don't believe so, but I will have to check that list. But of the 21 annexations that were recertified by the Governor's Boundary Commission, the majority of those were already within the town limits and were being redone to make them official. Most of the properties that were added that we are not collecting the taxes on are open space, and I would say in the would be the southwestern portion of the town.
So two hot areas that we do need to be concerned about are Foothills and then Upper Ranchitos. And so these are the citizens that are upset about annexation, and they want to be heard. And it's Upper Ranchitos and it's Foothills neighborhood. So we've got to be sensitive to that, and we need to give them their day.
Well, I would believe that this would serve that purpose, in that it would be conducting a public hearing, notifying every property owner of interest who would have the opportunity to come forward and express their opinion, not just to the Planning Commission, but that zoning plan will have to eventually be adopted by the council as well.
Right, and of course it's their feeling that they were pretty much not listened to when they were annexed, even though 99% of them were opposed to annexation and felt the Boundaries Commission had just kind of run over them. Now I'm just relaying what I've heard. So I guess my concern here is 55,000 regarding annexation. It definitely will bring the people in, So that's a great start to a meeting, but perhaps not the most positive start. But we should be aware of that and maybe consult with a representative of Foothills and Upper Ranchitos.
Well, Councilman, I can tell you that as the representative of the county and the planning director at the time, it was my responsibility to defend those citizens from the county's perspective. And I had a fairly good working relationship with the Foothills Neighbor Association because we were trying to jointly, they're half in the county, half out of the county, and we were trying to adopt them. In the hearings, and I can get you a copy of the record because everyone that was here had to be sworn in or signed in, there were very few people that actually showed up from either of those areas, and most of the testimony was taken from probably less than a half a dozen property owners who were concerned about the loss of agricultural status or the loss of water to maintain agricultural status. So I don't know that the 99%, if they are opposed, they simply did not come out. And they had to be notified by the town. In fact, there was the service needed to be perfected because that was the basis of the county's allegation, was that the service was done improperly the first time. So there actually were 3 notifications, as I recall, that went out over a period of 6 months to property owners.
2 years.
I
Notifications.
don't dispute that, but they do. And so we need to dig deep. But I think Councilman Barrone.
I don't have anything.
So anyway, I guess back to, thank you, Martha.
Yes.
So carefully we go through that one. Water hookups in town, Mr. French? How do we verify that folks who actually live in town are being required to hook up? So this is not an annexation issue or anything like that. I live in the Cruz Alta neighborhood, and I have a nice well, and the water line's 100 feet away. What's requiring me in town to actually hook up my water and sewer? Who's the enforcement agency?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Barrone, there is an ordinance in place that requires any new development to hook up to either the water and or the sewer if they're both available. I believe one is 300 feet and the other is 150 feet. However, before that ordinance was passed, there's something in there that says that if you're hooked up to a domestic system or a private system, that you're not required to hook up because the ordinance passed in recent history.
Is
Mr. Mayor?
that really the way we want to go forward?
Well, the whole thing was that, Councilmember Hahn, was that when we looked at the ordinance, we had some pretty significant pushback of individuals that had private wells and saying, now you're going to require me to cap it and hook up to your system. And that wasn't the instance. The part of the whole reasoning behind our moving forward with an ordinance that, mandated or required hookup with water and sewer was to, A, get new development on the city's deep water well system as opposed to draining the upper aquifer, but number 2, so that we didn't have a bunch of septics that were running around leaking into the groundwater. So part of it was groundwater mediation on our part to say, if you have a sewer system, and this was part of the pushback that we got out of the Foothills Neighborhood Association as well, was saying, well, many of us are on fixed incomes. We don't have the money to hook up into the town's infrastructure, and we were sympathetic to that. We understood that. So in many cases, it didn't apply towards already pre-existing. It was mainly on new development that was up and coming, and really for the purpose of not restricting somebody that had spent $18,000 to drill a well, for us to just come and take it away and say, well, you can only use it to water your lawn.
Councilor Peralta?
Mayor, Councilmember Hans, the council a year and a half ago
Yeah.
looked at the requirements for water hookup based upon the input after the annexation, and looked at changing the requirements that people had to hook up if they were within 150 feet or 300 feet, and making some exceptions for that. However, the council never finished that. And some of the discussion there was that if you had a domestic well, that you wouldn't be required to hook up until it failed, or till the well failed.
Until when?
The well failed.
Oh.
Okay. I'm sorry. So that was one of the discussions. The other discussion was that if you had a domestic well, that you wouldn't be required to hook up at any time. The other discussions were that you would have to hook up, but you could continue using your domestic well for irrigation purposes. So there was a lot of different discussions that went on, but no completion of that into a change in the ordinance to accommodate some of the concerns that the individuals throughout the city had with their wells. Now, one of the things is that if you have a well permit, we can't take that away from you. The only one that can take that away from you is the state engineer's office. So that was a 40-year-old lawsuit that the town had when an individual tried to, or didn't try, but went out and redeveloped their well when it failed. And the court case on that determined that the only one that could take away a well permit was the state engineer's office, and the town lost that lawsuit. So in that, you can require that people hook up, but you can't take away their well. What was the council was trying to do at that time was trying to come up with a way to accommodate people and keep their investments in some way, respect that investment, I guess, is the best way to term it. But we never accomplished that, and I think it's overdue for us to bring that back again and look at it and come up with a solution to it, because I think there was interest on the part of all the council members to do something that would give value to that investment that people had already put into their wells.
Thank you, Councilman Peralta, and I wholeheartedly agree. We've got to deal with this in a forthright manner. I think it's off. I'll speak loud. So I agree with you, Councilman. Thank you for bringing that up, and perhaps we can wail on yet another unfinished item. Is it appropriate to talk about historic district funding at this time, or is that coming up? Okay, so my last question, and you've all been very patient, thank you. $45,000 for an employee in the historic district? I thought the historic district employee was hired, or we lost that position and the county hired that position, and so what's going on there? Are we taking this person back from the county, or are we going to have two people down there with the county, or what's up, Doc?
You have the scenario correct, that the town had the position funded as a contract position. The county hired the person as a temporary employee, which has a limit on it. The county informed us that because they were paying for that employee as a planning department person plus putting $40,000 in, and the original agreement between the town and the county was for the county to just put the $40,000 in, and the town would put $50,000 in from the historic district. That the county now felt that now that the town is back on board with doing the Arts District and Main Street program, that they need to hire that person, whether it's a contract or temporary person, or whether we eventually contract with which is probably what will happen, with the Arts and Cultural District or some entity. But for now, we need to keep that line item in there so that we can keep the program going till we work out the model between the state and the county and ourselves.
Mr. Mayor, thanks, Fritz, for bringing that up. With regards to that proposed budget, would that be an employee of the Town of Taos?
Well, it's listed that way because, as you remember, Counselor, you and I had that discussion in one of the joint meetings, and you felt, and I expressed the opinion, that we had more control than a consultant because we didn't really know where their hours were and what they were putting in. So I've listed it the same way as the county did, which is to hire a temporary employee, which means we're only paying the minimal benefits of workman's comp, unemployment, taxes, but not health benefits, and it's not a full permanent employee. And that allows us that option to see how as we go forward, what model works best. But the worst thing that would happen is if we have a disruption on July 1st, right in the middle of where right now we're really starting to get the ball rolling of creating events for the downtown and putting the farmers market out there and doing some development. I also have a strong interest in approaching the county that certainly the offices for that and the idea of consolidating the Chamber of Commerce and Small Business Development Center and UNM and all the business services up there in the courthouse, there seems to be less interest by the current commission. And well, I don't think they would give up the building. I do think that courthouse is extremely central to our redeveloping the downtown, both in the front and the back, particularly with our discussions about the parking lots now. So I would like to approach them about the idea of a dollar lease for at least a minimum of a 10-year period. We have a lot of activity that's interested in doing something in that building, and I think it's easier for us. I know Commissioner Romero feels a little awkward that he would have to ask a group out of his district who is not paying rent and has exceeded the incubator period to conform with the anti-donation clause and relocate, but we're trying to help him with that. Maybe this is one way to do that.
So I guess just one of the biggest questions I have, because this was part of what led to some of the fallout with the ACD from the Plaza merchants, where we had some pretty decent buy-in with saying, okay, if we're expending, I can't remember at that time what it was, but we'll take this number, for example, $45,000 for an individual. The historic district almost felt like they could create or form their own board, per se, and better utilize the way that $45,000 is spent. I mean, that's left up to interpretation as to what they feel versus what we feel. Right. But again, I mean, I guess I feel like we're just back in this realm of playing the marketing game again, where it's an area that maybe we shouldn't be concentrating because it's not what we do. And so, I mean, I do have some heartburn with regards to, that type of money for expenditures, especially when they come back and say, well, 45 grand could, put some flowers down in the plaza, can, fix some messed up sidewalks, can do whatnot, and when they come back to us and they say, well, you're expending this money on an individual, but what are we getting for it? And so again, with us, it was just that hard area of saying, where is our measurable deliverables? What does this 45,000 in essence bring to us? I mean, if it's 1.1 million in gross receipts tax revenue because that's what they brought to the plaza, then great. But again, we just don't have that model to show us what we're doing and where we're going. So I'm a little hesitant with that one, just because of the fact that I've seen the pushback from it. And again, they want to hire their own ED, they want to do all their own stuff. I'm not opposed to handing over that money as long as we see deliverables from them. I just don't like it as the way it's currently set up, which is an actual employee of the Town of Taos, which means we're subject to a lot of stuff outside of just, the short-term stuff, which is also, vehicle access, everything else that it compiles into. So just, that's my 2 bits about it, and that's just where I...
Well, Councilman, I think if you go back to the opening statement I made, I said we were making a short-term commitment to take back the program with the goal that within 4 years there'd be a self-sustaining business improvement district, and then having discussions with Steve. Managing downtowns when you're a municipality, no matter what you do, you're not going to win. You know, if you put the baskets up, then they complain that they don't look good. If you don't put the baskets up, you're not doing anything. If you put stuff on the plaza, then, you know, to generate activity, then people don't like what the activity is. And ultimately, if the downtown's going to be successful, it has to take a life of its own. It has to form a board that the businesses have a hand in, and create some sort of improvement district where they have their own maintenance staff. Maybe we assign an officer and they pay that salary for the time that officer is there. I don't know, given the three-way fight between the town, the county, and the state that's gone on for the past year, that we're at a point that we can do that right now. I think we're making progress in our meetings we're having with the merchants downtown. And we might be there in 6 months. So again, as I was saying, think of it as a placeholder to put that in there. The county is throwing in the 20,000. They are agreeing to throw another 30,000 into dealing with the handicapped access issue to the courthouse. And I'm not sure they wouldn't go more than that if they saw that we were serious about coming up with a permanent solution. But I think we as the town, because it is in our ballpark, are going to have to be the ones to propose what that solution is, and then get the buy-in of the county and the merchants.
And I guess for me, Rick, real quick, Councilmember Peralta, is that I'm very okay with a very short-term solution, and I say very short-term as like a year. And the reason I say that is because I'd like to see a board of directors hold this money and do with it as they will, made up by an entity that is comprised of everybody that's within the historic district. Because then again, you have one individual that is kind of making the decisions for the entire historic district, that maybe one side or the other side, 50%, 49, 51, doesn't agree with. And we're at that pivotal point again of saying who's right.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that, Councilman. I think if you can give us the latitude till July 1 to come back to you with a firmer model, this is a piece of looking at the planning department and saying planning, community, economic development, and certainly we're going to have to look at the grant developer. We're going to have to look at the tourism and marketing person, and probably this downtown coordinator, and how that fits together to come up with a model of maybe we only need 2 people, maybe we don't need a 3rd person, and maybe it's better spent in the district in another way. But we're taking on, from a political standpoint, we're taking on a lot of traditions right now and a lot of constituencies, just like bringing the farmers market in, just like challenging, well, maybe we want to look at how we do the marketing contract. I don't know that this is one that, you know, before tonight I could have gotten a consensus on with you until those other pieces fall in place. But I do think that there is a consensus developing from the initial meeting, and you were there, about the parking issues. And that's gotten into the tourism forums, and it's gotten into the marketing meetings, that we really are starting to build a constituency that is the majority in the downtown right now. And once we have that, it's going to be a lot easier for us to use that group that has grassroots support to say, what do you guys want to do? This is what we have in the budget.
And that's where I see it, you know, with terms of, let's say, the placement of the farmers market within the historic district. For us to make that decision costs not just time, but huge political capital in some instances. At the same point, saying I'd rather have this board of directors with buy-in directly from, I mean, each one of them being maybe a member out of that historic district to make that decision with a recommendation to us, and whether or not that fits. Much like the parking meters, you know, that solely rested on us. It was advertised, it was put out there. We had our reasonings behind it, but still, you know, again, just the cost of political capital is what I'm mostly concerned with in instances where we really don't need to be expensing it.
I agree with you, Councilman, and whether it's the Main Street model or it's an improvement district board of directors or whatever it is, trust me, it's a top priority, because I realize my life expectancy is probably tied to it as well.
Do you have anything? And Counselor, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Would we be able to look at maybe combining that new person who's coming in that's going to replace Kathy Connolly's position with the person who could coordinate all the events in the historic district or things that are being planned for the future? A combination rather than separate?
Possibly. But I don't know who we're going to get to respond to that ad right now. And I don't know what their background is going to be. But clearly, yeah, there should be one person coordinating all the events within the core of the town. And but eventually, if you create a downtown historic district, a Main Street district, an arts district, whatever, and we merge all those together, they're going to need somebody to carry that campaign on. And the state always insists on that because whenever it becomes just sort of a volunteer board, it never gets the attention it really needs. And that's how downtowns get in trouble. I mean, that's the problem we have right now, is that we're really just involved in the peripheral of doing the events and providing the scenery, so to speak. But there's no real coordination between the businesses and the business organizations and the merchants and the event planners.
Yep. So true.
Counselor Peralta, did you have?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So this individual will be under the authority of the planning department?
That's correct.
And looking at this, under other contractual services, what is the $30,000 Main Street program? Is that what we have to pay to belong to the Main Street program?
No. There's no membership fee on that.
Contractual services under the budget for the Main Street program.
Under the historic district.
Historic district.
I guess that's the number I put it on. And I think Councilmember Peralta, we put that in 30,000 just to have for the program, whatever happens actually on the historic district.
Oh yeah, I believe that's for the events component.
Right.
Yeah, there was a commitment between the town and the county that we would put something in there for events. And again, that's going to have to be an RFP process. It'll probably go out with one of those other RFPs we were talking about on the economic development. But that would be Main Street's cost of doing those events. And the way we came up with that figure is that it's $250 an hour, $500 a night for Plaza Live. And we extrapolated that we wanted to do 3 days a week during the peak season and worked into that number.
So this would be contracting with the Chamber of Commerce for night live rather than Thursday night live?
I don't think there's actually, that's another problem, is I don't think there's a desire by the Chamber of Commerce to actually be in the events business, and they're looking for another entity to take that on. So I don't know that they would want to take on the other 2 nights. The desire was really to have something that appealed to local people as well as to tourists. And so there's been dialogue with representatives of the Pueblo about doing, for example, drum circle or circle dances down there on one night, and to bring northern New Mexican rancheros and mariachi and traditional music on another night that would help keep tourists longer and kind of showcase our tricultural heritage. And we had run that by the Secretary of Tourism for the state, who's from here, and she actually thought that was a great idea, that she wanted us to buy into the New Mexico True concept, saying that really she sort of built it in the image of Taos, and that, but we were missing that cultural aspect to the outdoor experience, and that she felt it was important.
So I'm just trying to figure out how this is being coordinated. I can understand putting $30,000 to do these events, but how is that actually going to be coordinated? And because the person that you have to do part-time historic district in Main Street isn't going to have time to do this. So
Well,
somebody's going to have to do it, and I'm just trying to say, where is that?
Yeah, actually, a lot of that dialogue is already in place about who those bands are and acts and their commitment to do that. It was really just lacking the money to make it happen. But ideally, going back to where your involvement came in with the Arts District, the organization now has this 501c3, and we do a LEDA agreement with that Main Street Arts District organization and let them actually book the entertainment. So we don't have to deal with all the anti-donation problems.
And again, I think, councilors, this is all goes back to, kind of a placeholder. We talked in the early portion of this from Mr. Bellis, we were talking about grants, somebody to continue to look for grants. Councilor Hahn, as we move forward and you're talking about the revitalization of the Rio Fernando, the BLM, the Forest Service, the Bureau of Reclamation, there's monies available for reclamation or there, I guess, taking out of non or evasive plants that are continuing to evade the Rio Fernando and I guess, I don't know how we want to phrase that, but making it better so that there's not a bunch of plants and different things drinking up the water as it's coming down that are evasive there. And again, in the historic district and in the Main Street program, the ACD is basically a placeholder so we can continue to look for funding, because now that, we talk about there was a portion in time where the recession hit everybody, not only the town, the county, but the feds, and a lot of these programs had gone away. There was not any money available to continue to fund a lot of these programs. Now there is money becoming available, and if we don't have a placeholder and a way to go after those funds, we'll never receive them. There's, in the Main Street program alone, there's millions of dollars that could be allocated in our direction, provided we have the program in place. And as Councilor Gonzalez alluded to, there is a short time where we need to move forward and try to get this money or try something different. But we got to find a way to try to get these funds made available to the town so that we can continue this. We talk about culture. We talk about a cultural center right downtown in the old county courthouse is a great avenue that we can look at. And again, through that Main Street program, that's something I think could get funded. But again, it's there's two prongs to this. Is one, we have to go after the funding, but then we have to have the program available to us too. So I mean, and even in the Rio Fernando type things also.
Mr. Mayor, I wasn't quite finished with my questions.
Oh, sorry.
So the JPA that we discussed a couple of months ago between the town and the county is a no longer entity with the Arts and Cultural District and the Main Street. The county has basically fallen out of its commitment to that. I mean, when we're going from 40,000 to 20,000.
Well, in a sense, they see the 30,000 they're putting into saying that they'll work with us on a problem to the handicap solution of the courthouse as an additional contribution, so they see it as 70. They also see that they've put in a lot of money into the renovation of the courthouse based on the belief of revitalizing that courthouse as a business center and as an entertainment center. But yeah, it's a major shift, and I think to be blunt, I sold the commissioners there on the belief that economic development was important, that the downtown, that the town represented 60% of the tax base, and by showing them statistics that it wasn't improving, it was getting worse, and that they needed to be involved. And so there was the 40,000, and then there was a position within the planning department that I actually used to fund the position for the Main Street director. So in total, I would say, yeah, they probably had $100,000 into it, which was the $100,000 that was committed by both parties, but the town hadn't put their half. Now they're saying, okay, we paid the full cost for a year. Now we'll still go in with the 20 and the 30 and throw the building in and pay for the utilities and everything. You guys
Well, the
pay for
only
the
problem
person.
I'm having with the $30,000 is that's a requirement by the ADA. And really isn't anything other than their requirement in order to make that building accessible, or you close it. So I can't look at that as being a commitment to that, because if it's just like us, if we got a sidewalk that is a hazard, we're going to fix it. And we can't use the investment in that as something that's putting money into a program that's moving the ball forward. So I just look at it and say, that's why I'm saying is that we've dropped now from 40,000 to 20,000, and what's going to happen next year? And I'm just looking at it from the standpoint of we want to work together, but it just doesn't seem like it's really kind of going that way. In some instances, not every instance, but in some instances, just like, you know, what are we doing with the 911 center, in the sense of really what should be the budget there, and that gets cut back from the other side. And it has been one of those push issues over a couple of years, so this is nothing new. And I'm just looking from the standpoint of saying, you know, if we're going to be in this together, then we need to really roll up our sleeves and get in it together.
I agree, Councilman, and, you know, unfortunately, I don't have the influence since I came over to the dark side, you know, but with the county. But you know, I know their view on 911, and I've heard it is that they're putting $1.25 million into the software which we're going to use, and the building, and so if they have to put a little less into operating for a year or two. And you know, there's an argument back and forth, and when you're on the other side, you can always find justification for what you're doing and why. But yes, it's a decrease in their commitment financially to economic development. You know, the third part we haven't discussed is that on this public information officer, marketing and tourism person, that clearly at the joint meeting there was a commitment by Chairman Romero that he wanted to see the county actively participate in that, and we haven't heard anything on that either. But I'm pursuing their participation on all three subjects.
Councilor Gonzalez and Mr. Sanchez. We'll go to Councilor Gonzalez first.
I guess I'm still just having heartburn with the salary amount, Rick, and because for me, if we're saying it's a part-time position, at
No, it's a full-time position.
Full-time.
It's temporary in the sense that what I wanted to do is exactly what you've suggested, which is we're putting a stopwatch on it. We're saying we're only going to do it for a fixed amount of time. We can only retain an employee. It's normally a temporary employee is a 6-month position. You can renew it once, but once we hit that clock, somebody's got to do something because it's not going to get renewed. So it does add a sense of urgency.
Annual basis.
Yes.
Not okay.
So is that an annualized salary of
That's annualized, yes.
45,000 or is it 90,000?
No, 45,000.
45.
Annualized.
Yes.
Mr. Sanchez? It is a public hearing, so we'll have to swear you in. We'll just swear you in, we won't swear at you.
You will pretty soon.
Please state your name for the record. State your name for the record.
Gene Sanchez.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I didn't want to say this, but you know, when I was practicing architecture, I designed many projects for state, federal, a lot of school work. And are you familiar with Parkinson's law? Anyway, I would make my presentations before a school board and I would discuss heating systems, many things that were very, very important. But you know what got me all caught up and kept me there at these meetings for an extra hour, an hour and a half, was the discussion of where we were going to put the coffee pot in the teacher's lounge. Now, you have discussed many important things tonight. You've discussed roofs, water rights, on and on and on, and for the last half hour, you've been discussing some kind of a $20,000 concern. I get a little frustrated. You have to put up with me. Public hearing, right? You talk about annexation. When I was on the council with former Mayor Darren Cordova, in front of the entire public, he said, we are not going to do any more annexation to this town except straighten up some lines, which made sense. Estes Road, for example, zigzag, straighten it up. That made a lot of sense. The next thing you know, I'm already off the council, and he's going around annexing people who don't want to be annexed into the town. All right, how many more acres do you think you're going to annex? Let's go up a road towards El Prado. You're not going to go any further than that unless you want to have a battle with El Prado. You know where that'll get you. You're going to go down and annex Canyon. You're going to go annex Ranchos. You're going to go down Ranchitos Road. Well, what are you going to be annexing? How big is this town going to get? Now, we had a firm working for the town. It was out of Glorieta. I think it was Glorieta Geotech. They, at one time, recommended to the town that the town should not buy the water from the top of the world. And it was offered to the town at a very reasonable price. We turned it down. Now, what was this man's job? I won't mention his name, but his job was to protect the town when it came to water rights, well drilling, and so forth. He said, I have to go out and buy water rights for the town. I said, well, why didn't you buy all those water rights from the top? Oh, we didn't want those. All right. We have a water treatment reserve in the enterprise fund. I'm going to ask you, how many water rights have you bought in the past few years, Marietta?
None that I know of.
Okay. Buying water rights is going to get harder and harder and harder. Fortunately for Taos, we sit on a lot of water. It comes from southern Colorado, believe it or not. We have citizens in this town. By the way, the ordinance, I went back to 1947 to see what the ordinance said as far as hooking up to water and sewer. And it's not anything recent. It goes back several years. And the water ordinance doesn't say if you're a new development you have to. It says if you're within 300 feet, you have to hook up. Now, you can go down Camino de la Merced, where former Mayor Darren Cordova lives, and I used to bring this up, well, supposedly lives and has his DMC broadcasting. And there are so many people violating our own laws. They have their own wells. You have trailer parks that don't even have any water or sewer hookups. That means that these trailers are dumping their waste into our ground. Why haven't we over this past several years followed the ordinances that we have? And why is it people like me, every time I drink a glass of water, it costs me some sewer money too? Why is it people, and I have a well at the house, I don't use it. And one of the reasons I don't use it is because everybody around me that has moved in has been drilling their wells. So my water table is so low that I don't even bother with my pump. When are we going to make these people come in and realize that if they're going to drill a well, first of all the wells within the city limits are illegal. I called up the state. I said, you give everybody a permit to drill a well. Yes, we have to by law. But they said the town of Taos is supposed to approve these wells. And the only one that I know that we pulled back was Valverde Commons here, which was an illegal development to begin with because they didn't even comply with town law. But hey, let's not worry about that. Let's let them go ahead and build their development. By law, they had to hook up the water and sewer. I guess they did that. I know they hooked up water. I don't know what they've done with their sewer. But then they turned around and they started drilling wells. And that's when I went to the state and I said, what's going on here? And the state said, well, the council must have approved it. I said, the council never approved it. So we stopped that. We went down there and we made them fill up their well casings. They were supposed to fill it up from from water all the way up. I got a lot of sources. They tell me they went down about 6 feet just to cap it. In the future, with nobody's aware what's going on, they'll probably go ahead and pump it. We have great big commercial properties, many offices that are operating off of a well. So I'm paying for them, water and sewer. If we have all these wells, and you take Weimar Heights, some of those people have been there, God knows how long. We've got to amortize our investment here. Okay, they can pump water all day long and not have to pay for it and not have to pay for any sewer because I don't think they want to be hooked up to the sewer. Put a meter on their water. If a person wants to keep their well, put a meter on it. Let them help us, those of us who pay and stay within the law. Let's do something about that. Why is it that trailer parks don't have water and sewer? A lot of homes don't have water and sewer. They can't afford a hookup. Amortize it. Put it in their bill where they can hardly fill it, as long as they're not lowering our aquifer. Okay, I'm going to get on to something else now. You're talking about roof repairs, and this really burns me up. I was on the council when the swimming pool was being constructed. And I kept saying, it's not right. They're not doing the right thing when they were working, because they took all the time they wanted. And the town actually went in there and sort of finished up cleaning and stuff like that. I said, you can't do that. It's going to violate, it's going to ruin all your warranties. But they did it anyway. We had a town representative that was supposedly overlooking how the construction of this swimming pool was going on. Finally, towards the end of this thing, after we had put a lot of money into, which I'm going to get to, I said, all right, let me see a set of plans. He didn't have a set of plans. The town didn't have a set of plans. So how is it that somebody from the town that's supposed to be overseeing the quality of this construction doesn't have a set of plans? That's what happens when you start hiring cuates. You've got to get professionals to do these things because it costs you thousands and thousands of dollars. All right, the new swimming pool, about 3 years after it was occupied, was destroyed with leaky roofs, mold. We had to spend $500,000 to go in there and clean up that mess. In the process of cleaning up that mess, they went up to fix the roof, which is causing all this problem. And they said this roof was not constructed in keeping with the specifications. I told the town at that time, we should get the contractor's insurance company to pay for the $500,000 that was caused because of a roof leak. And they should go in there and remove the roof and replace it in keeping with specifications. What was done? Nothing. Now, was that bad construction over there? Yes. Brian Greer, at my insistence, I said, I want to walk through this thing. After this building had been constructed, and it was sitting there for a long time. I was able to run my finger against the paint job on the wall, and it came right off because the contractor diluted that paint with so much water, it hadn't even dried yet. So all this expenditure could have been avoided if you would have had professionals on the job. I just had my roof replaced. I was sick and tired of working. As much as I love to work locally, couldn't get anything done right, couldn't get anything done right, leak, couldn't get anything done right. So I finally called up the TCA, and they said, contact the town, and I talked to your town man, and he gave me some very good advice. So I called Albuquerque, the same roofer you guys used. He came up immediately, the company representative came up immediately with a roofer, looked over the job. I said, all right, I want you to tell me what we have to do here. The roofer took 3 core samples out of the roof. And my gosh, the roofs were about that thick. The law says after 3 roofs, you could tear it down and start again. I had 4 or 5 roofs up there. I had wet insulation, and I said, give me a price for the best roof you can put on. And that was an EPDM system, like a great big rubber mat. Guaranteed, it's warranted for life, and I have a 2-year guarantee from the contractor. Get a roofing company that'll send somebody up here and do some core drillings for you, and you'll know exactly what your problems are. I even had some bad roof deck that had to be replaced. If you're going to get consultants, you have to be very careful, because the town of Taos was sold a bill of goods. And by that I mean you have a treatment plant down there that was absolutely unnecessary. Why didn't the town of Taos expand settlement ponds and aeration ponds? What you have there is what you put in a city that doesn't have much space. All right, so I was looking through your budget. You have about $950, I guess, for this firm out of Albuquerque to run the darn thing. Same firm that recommended you build this thing. But are you aware that you have about $243,000 a year in electrical demand at that facility? You have great big 3-phase electrical motors that have to run these turbos, which I believe you had to replace one not too long ago. The turbo, I think, cost $11,000. If you got a consultant, why didn't you get a cost operating analysis? It might be cheap up front, but my gosh, it's so complex that you have to have a consultant. Not true. You could bring this back into the house and save about $500,000. I'm going on what you touched on, Mr. Hahn. What else did you bring up? Huh?
It's way past my bedtime.
I know, and it's way past my bedtime too.
I
But some
think
of
you
these
got 'em.
major items,
You got them.
you need to take a look at this stuff. Don't spend a half an hour, 45 minutes here talking about a $20,000 coffee pot. Let's talk about these things that are breaking us. They're costing us money that we didn't have to spend. And like I said, you may not be too happy with me now, but I sit back there and I just, gosh. Wells need to be permitted through the town of Taos after they're permitted from the state. These are things you should know. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gene.
Marietta?
I lost track. So really the only thing that I wanted to go through and just show you is that capital projects, which I think Councilmember Hahn has pretty much asked a lot of questions on. Right now there's just, if you see on your screen, I think in front of you, the pink items that we did add on the capital projects or change. One thing is the Youth and Family Center roof. We did add $100,000. That's not to fix it. That's just to get something started. Hopefully the design or a specialty engineer that needs to look at that roof. So we did put $100,000 in there. This is just from the last meeting that we did on Fund 51. We added $100,000 in there for information technology equipment, and if there's more direct questions, we can ask manager on that and Conrad. We also put in, I think that was it, actually, those are the, I'm just gonna go through, because I can't see up there. Those were actually the only changes that we did on the capital projects. On Fund 30, we did re-identify some of the, let me get to Fund 30. We put community advertising in there, and we changed the amount for the community sick, indigent, public welfare. Those are the RFPs that the manager talked about that we want to do for certain services like CAV, the Taos Children's Theater, whatever the need is of the town, to do an RFP to get those services going, and then the professional lobby services. So we just changed up the identification on some of those. Other than those few items, those are the only things we changed in the capital and community grants funds. Other than, let me see, just lodger's tax, I think we've already talked about pretty much all of the things. These are the budgets that had some of the changes that were requested at the May 8th meeting by the council. So I don't know if you want to go into any individual one, or if you have any further questions. I'll open whichever one you may want.
Council?
I'm good, Mr. Mayor and fellow Councilwoman and Councilman, thank you, and Marietta, thank you, and French, and Steve, and staff, Martha, Rick, thanks.
Go ahead, Marietta.
Other than that, I'm just going to go back to or I'm not, because I can't even see. Okay, well, you have yours on your screen, just the overall overview of the total budget. Other than that, that's all I really have to offer on all the changes that we made. Like I said, this will go out to DFA as the preliminary budget. Any changes that I do make will be, oh, very good. Will be in this beginning balance. Carryover projects, anything in these capital funds, and really there shouldn't be too much. Just like I said, town hall, we are gonna, they probably start with that construction soon and do some pay estimate before the end of the fiscal year. There's really nothing, maybe some engineering services on different projects, but other than that, this figure will change slightly, and the capital projects carryovers. Other than that, unless there's something that comes up in between, there should not be any other changes to the budget other than what I expressed on those ones there.
I know this is a public hearing. Is anybody in the audience, staff, anybody that wants to speak? Seeing none, hearing none. We'll go ahead and close the public portion of this hearing. And council, any further questions? I think there needs to be a motion to adopt the preliminary budget so that Marietta and the staff can submit it to the state of New Mexico for approval.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say one thing contrary to what former Councilor Gene Sanchez just told us about arguing over a $20,000 problem. I think it's our fiduciary duty to argue over even a $1 problem, because that's what we were elected to this office to do. So I appreciate the engagement in this discussion this evening, regardless of the dollar amount, because I think we owe it to our constituents when we're tasked to account for $5,000 where it was spent, that we know exactly where it went and how it got there. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I would move for approval for adoption of this preliminary budget for FY 2014-2015.
We do have a motion. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Further discussion? Maria?
Mr. Mayor, just for future meeting in June, I will actually bring the actual resolutions for all of these, for the pay and classification plan, for the budget policies, try to get those out a couple weeks before, which will be in the next week, because either the first or trying to get the first meeting of June to get all the actual resolutions that will be submitted at the end of July. That's when the final budget is actually submitted, so
Mr.
just housekeeping stuff.
Under that, pay and classifications, I know we had talked previously of including the employees' benefits into what their pay actually reflects, as opposed to just going with their straight base wage. So we can have a true picture as to, I mean, because that's one thing that I think a lot of times is left out with our employees, is we focus constantly on the base wage, but not the fact that we provide them a health insurance plan as well, which is huge, I mean, nowadays, considering cost. So when that pay and classification plan comes back, will it reflect that, Mr. Manager?
Yes, Councilman, we can do that. And while you bring that subject up, I do want to repeat one caution I said earlier in our budget, and that is that while we have fully funded the plan presented by the prior administration for compensation, it really moves us down a road where we have fewer and fewer dollars that are discretionary, and more is tied up in payroll. My other concern is that this is not a compensation plan that is based on the input of the supervisors as to the quality of the work that individuals have taken on or additional work they have taken on. So there is no reward to this, and I'm concerned that because it is a flat increase, and with a union around the corner, and that's a certainty with a 75%, 80% sign-up rate, that is the way they handle that. And this may be your last opportunity to actually look at, I mean, there are people that have basically just bounced around from job to job within the town and are getting $10,000, $15,000 increases. I don't know what kind of message that sends, but once the union's in place, you're going to be giving everybody the same thing. And in approving the budget, you are improving the line items, not necessarily the compensation plan. And I would ask that, I don't want to hold this up, but I would ask that I be allowed to meet with one or two of you from the council and that committee that put this together, and to look at the idea of maybe we do the 25 cent for everybody, but maybe taking where it went up to 8% on top of that for other individuals, and at least that the department managers have some input to that, and we look at taking a percentage of that, 250?
Approximately. 250 all throughout all.
$250,000, and providing some incentives to some folks that have really taken on, that have stepped into doing jobs, 2, 3 jobs sometimes, or wherever they've been asked to go.
I'd be happy to meet with you on that, because I think it's vital and it's important to the health of this organization, how we base that pay. I just think oftentimes it's left out the benefit fact, because many employers, well, you know, the president will focus on the $10.10 an hour. Realistically, how many employers at $10.10 an hour can afford to pay a health insurance plan on top of that? And if they are, is that equated into the 1010? So I'd just like to see the overall picture so that we can give a true justification to our employees what they actually make in terms of going elsewhere.
And we'll bring that information back to you in that format.
Thank you.
Yeah, the way I used to do it, and it was valid 10 years ago, I don't think things have changed that much. The numbers have, but you can take the hourly rate and then add another 33% onto your rate. Mr. Bellis, if you're looking for a counselor to sit with you as a small businessman and an entrepreneur and a union man, I'd be happy. I think I can bring a balanced approach if you feel you need that added input. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Roll.
Yeah, Rick, I guess my question is that what we were looking at in the compensation plan was adjusting those people who were grossly out of alignment with what they should be making based upon the job. And that was just trying to kind of even out the scale, realizing that we were not bringing people up to the market, but trying to bring those people who are really off the market closer to what the market should be. Is that still in the compensation plan, or is that, have you changed that?
We haven't changed it, that's what's in there. But I think it's more a review of individual departments, like he said, with directors that nobody else has really seen it. The directors haven't seen it, the supervisors haven't seen it. The plan is still what was presented by the benefits committee. So the numbers are in there. The numbers are in the budget based that way.
So who was in the budget committee, the compensation committee?
The former HR director.
I don't know if anybody here, myself, I wasn't in there. Miranda Quintana was in there. I think, I don't know if Amy was. I don't know the list of those people. I think Amy was. Brian Greer was. I think Leroy Gonzalez was.
So there were some department heads that were involved in?
Yes, there were some department heads, so I can't say that all the department heads don't know what it is. There was a few in there, and a few line people, and I don't know the whole makeup of it. And I think that's what Rick is, we haven't gone back to meet, new management hasn't gone back to meet with the benefits committee and the process and just to get themselves familiar with what's actually in there. But it is, that the plan is the way they presented it as we first discussed it with so many people here with that are worst off based on really the market rate, not any job responsibilities. I think it's just where they ended up in their grade right now and the years of experience.
Mr. Mayor.
Counselor?
Sorry, go ahead.
Were you done?
Go ahead.
Counselor Peralta?
I would just think that, that you keep that in mind as well as the other part of that, which is is compensation for value. And what I'm talking about there is if you got somebody who's outperforming, they should be awarded for that performance.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. But I think that we have to get some of the inequities that are in the pay package for individuals whose position by job description, now if they're not doing the job, then they shouldn't be employed. But if they're doing their job, they should be compensated according to what that job should require. And that's all I'm asking is that, those adjustments be made as much as possible. And then on top of that, if we can afford it, to do some of the other things, because you're right. If we do get unionized, all of that's going to go away. And if we don't get it adjusted before that happens, we're going to be in worse shape.
Yeah, and I don't mean, Council Mayor, I don't mean by any stretch of the imagination to say that anyone in there doesn't deserve it. I mean, our wages are pitiful. We have a long way to go to catch up on all of our jobs. But there are a few abnormalities that people just happen to be in a temporary assignment, and therefore, while that normally wouldn't be their duty, they look disproportionately out of whack to what their normal job would be. So they are getting a disproportionate increase as a result of that, and they may very soon go back to that other job. And now they're incredibly overpaid compared to the person sitting next to them.
I understand.
Mr. Mayor, I guess the same thing, Rick, along those lines. I completely agree with the performance-based pay and classification evaluations because of the fact that, if we don't have a list of measurables to say that this employee is warranted at this rate, then how do we know? I mean, it kind of goes with the theme that to have inequities of 10+ years is kind of a long tenure for an employee to fly under the radar without showing some type of good work. So again, just creating that list of measurables by the department heads too, to say, these are my performers, these are the ones that could use maybe some pushing, would be a good thing. So, I mean, when it's created in their employee file, almost a work order system that says task completed, you know, so there's a built-up file that says, look, this guy goes above and beyond.
Okay. All right, so, did you have anything else, Marietta?
No, I'm sorry,
Okay.
that was discussion,
Okay.
so.
Okay, so we'll have that in the budget, just, we gotta figure out exactly how we're gonna move forward. And there is a motion on the floor, there is a second, so call for the vote.
Councilmember Han?
Yes.
Councilmember Peralta?
Yes.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Quinto?
Yes.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Marietta, thank you.
Marietta.
I appreciate all the staff that put time in, all the different organizations, or the department heads is what I'm trying to say, that, you know, helped out and continue to move forward, and I appreciate it, so thank you.
You're welcome. I'm just going to stay here because I
Yes.
have the next item.
So the matters from staff, financial update.
I'm just going to really briefly go through the financial report. It's April's report. We're already through May, just about, in a few more days. So for April, our gross receipts taxes were up 8.7.3% over last year at this time. Most significant increases were in utilities and in professional, scientific, and technical services. Pretty much throughout the whole classification, there were slightly increases on pretty much across the board, with the exception maybe about 3 or 4 items. Do you have do you want me to-
Councilor
do you have a
Peralta?
question?
Could you like-
Utilities, could that be due to the wideband that's being put in by Kit Carson?
It's possible if that's where their classification is under. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And it just will fluctuate depending on where they're doing it, if they were in town at that time of the, which would be actually April, March, February?
February.
February, sorry, I have to go backwards.
Because that's when they put the stuff in my street, so.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I'm assuming that they were doing a lot of work within the city limits at that time.
Right, and I could probably get some report from Kit Carson broadband people that are doing it, just to have that information, so when it is every month, if it does fluctuate that much, I at least can have that answer. So, more than likely, yes.
Mr. Bellis, you had something else?
We can provide that actual breakout in the quarterly economic report, but by classification, but we're going to have to wait for that. Because of a presentation that's going to be made a little later on something on the agenda, I would like you to specifically identify those sectors that did not increase, that declined, and by how much.
That did or didn't?
Did not.
Did not.
Where were the decreases?
Transportation and warehouse, and administration and support, waste management and remediation. So, and then healthcare and social assistance, accommodation and food services were actually down, and other services.
How much?
Accommodation and food was $9,868 in dollars, so about 10% in their category, and other services $6,695, about 12% in that category.
Okay, thank you.
So everything else was up, but those were the ones that did decrease. And just year to date, 4.5% over last year this date. We already have May's in. May's receipts were pretty much about 0.73 of a decrease. So still based on one more month and a projection, the 4% that I projected from last month, we'll stick to that 4%. No change on that. Pretty much just preparing the budget, trying to get these departments with all their help and decreasing their 1%. I've taken that amount of $71,000 in their expected expenditures now. So a little bit more decrease in what they projected to expend this current year. Took that into effect. Also decreased the IT projected budget by about 46,000 because we had an anticipated cost, but we threw it into the one-time for the next fiscal year. Our ending balance is right now at 2 million, estimated to be 2,083,000, but knowing that whatever we are using to bring that additional reserve down, that's not going to be what it is at the end, which I already projected what we have. So we are using some of that second additional 2/12. Capital projects, really just this 199 for the 199,000 for the airport snow removal equipment building, and at this point in time they're already 100% complete because we're already in May, so these are just financial figures for April. And other than that, we have debt service now due in May, which was just this last couple of weeks. All the finance authority debt service payments, and the Eco Park, we will have the last one in June for the town hall. Other than that, I think you have the report. If you have any specific questions, I will answer them at this time. And you can see just the summary of estimated revenues. I mean, I will point out that I did make a little couple of changes on building permits. Doesn't seem like we're going to get the 83 that we anticipated at mid-year. And I think that was the only one that really looked off schedule. But based on actual figures, come June 30th, you'll have actual figures to reflect on whatever it is.
Thank you, Marietta.
Thank you, Marietta.
Thank you. Sorry.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Marietta. Thank you.
I hope we are making sense. It's
Based on the shortfall in building permits, so it would really be unlikely by the end of this year that we're going to do $200,000.
right. And at mid-year we projected 83,000. 83,000. We started with 44, then, it did pick up. And right now we're at 54,000 through April. I don't know what we have in May and June. I looked at May's already. There's, I think, another 4,000 so far. So for sure not going to get to 80 unless something happens, and Martha might have more information on that. But the building's just there.
There's some large projects, I think, that are on tap, isn't there, Martha? Have they pulled permits for those yet?
No, they still need to go through the planning process.
Yeah.
So
Even, Martha, real quick, I'm sorry. Would that even pertain to the one that's, I guess, just up for reevaluation and approval, because it's already been through the planning process, the one behind Sentinel Bank? Mm-hmm.
have a seat.
I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
The
That one,
condominium
I
project?
know what one you're talking about. He has not come back. So we're looking at the foundations and what they are right now, and then he projected a cost, but the actual estimate hasn't come back. We haven't seen him come back in. You're right, that's a big one,
So you should.
if it comes in.
I talked to him today, so you should see him.
Oh,
shortly.
we should. Oh, right, that's great. Well, that may help quite a bit.
So that might help.
Yeah.
I mean, the projections that I have are based on, actual expenditures, a summary of averaging out 12 months prior history stuff, and usually calling and talking to Martha and Dinah, seeing what kind of things are coming in. So that's
Yeah,
where
and
we are.
Counselor Gonzalez is right. I did include that project in our projections.
Good.
Yeah. So-
Well, within the next week or so, he said.
Well, that's great.
Unless the stock market crashes. But just kidding.
I'm like, oh, don't even.
Anything else, Marietta?
Not unless you all have any questions. I'm open for any.
Everybody okay on this? All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Council, you want to take a 5-minute break?
Let's go home. Let's finish up and go home.
Okay, if you want to.
Some people have been waiting all night.
You want to take over? I'll get it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Waste
Waste management,
Can't wait
Rick?
anymore. Go ahead.
Waste management?
Yeah.
Yep.
French is up on that.
Good morning, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council.
Close, close.
Wise guy.
Almost.
This is amendment number 2 to contract TT 14-85, and it's for the tipping fee at the Rio Rancho landfill for the sludge that we are producing at the wastewater treatment facility and transporting over there. And
Haven't we got a permit yet on our landfill to do it?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, no, we haven't. We are in the commentary phase of that, where all the information is going to be gathered and given back to the consultants, and then they will have a public hearing. And the Solid Waste Bureau will be part of that public hearing, and that is scheduled, I believe, for August, September, and October.
Okay, so what is the hauling charge if this is just the tipping fee? In other words, what is Waste Management charging us to haul it?
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, they're not charging us anything. We do our own hauling. This would be the...
Okay.
Yeah.
So what does it cost us to haul it?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't have those figures in front of me.
Look,
$85?
okay, the reason I'm asking this question, it goes back to one of your concerns, Councilor, and that is, if we don't have to haul it, what is the savings? And what can that savings then be used for? So if we were to put it in our own landfill, we would save what? $100,000 a year? So our total contract with Waste Management is going to go to almost $80,000 for tipping fees for the year?
Yes.
Plus the $85,000 to ship it, transport it there? So that's $160,000 to $170,000. And to send it 130 miles each trip. And our landfill would be 10 miles each trip. Plus no tipping fee.
That's correct. What's that?
Yes, tipping fee.
Yes, of course, there would be a tipping fee that would be assessed to that.
But I mean, it's
It's minor in comparison.
minor in comparison to what we're doing now.
Yes.
Okay. Questions from council?
I don't have any, Mr. Mayor.
Pleasure of the council.
I just want to address some concerns that a couple of citizens brought up regarding the sludge. French, you didn't really have a chance to respond to that, but could you enlighten us as to composting and efforts in the past? Is there a way we can...
Compost?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Han, yeah, of course, there is a way to compost. However, it is quite costly, and I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I will be able to, or more than happy to provide those to you as to what it was costing us before.
Right.
Yeah.
I just did French, you were very gracious to meet with me last week. He spent a couple hours with me so I could really spend some time learning about the landfill, the ins and outs. I know we did hear a citizen talk about the liner possibly leaking. I gotta tell you, with what I see out there, there is, I suppose, in the universe of possibilities, there's always a chance, but I really don't think there's any chance of leakage. From what I understand, the sludge will be dried over at the treatment plant, or the wastewater treatment, and caked, as it were. I think of it as brownies. And yeah.
You must be hungry.
Yeah. And then taken over and put in the landfill, and the smell, the cost of composting, the fact that we did try and compost the fact that it just didn't sell, I don't think we want to reinvent the wheel, and I'm sorry to, I love recycling, and I think it's absolutely essential if we're going to survive and if we're going to win the fight for that 7th generation, but in this case, I think we're better off keeping it in-house. And I'm happy to speak with anyone about the linings over there and the whole process. It's pretty intense, the operation that is at the landfill. It's way more than just a hole in the ground, and I'm impressed. And the infrastructure that runs through this town, when you think about water, you think about sewage, and all of that, it's incredible. So I don't want to make it Star Trekian, but I do have to say that I'm gonna come out and say that we need to move the sludge over to the landfill. Pure and simple. We need to save that buckage. I think Councilman Peralta's right. And the studies on landfill usage, the sludge will increase it, but it's not going to break us. It's not going to cause us to have to create a new cell before the new cell is due. So.
It's not substantial. How many hauls do you do?
We average, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, 3 hauls a week. 3 pulls a week to Albuquerque.
Those are 40-yard?
40-yard containers.
So 40-yard is like one trash truck. I just don't see any, but anyway, the other thing was that when you did the composting, the problem we had when we were doing fertilizer is we couldn't find a market to get rid of it. And we couldn't use all of it we were producing. But I can tell you it was one hell of a fertilizer, because I used it at home. And in 1 year, I would take, and Ted Martinez did the same thing. He put it on his
Alfalfa fields.
evergreens, and they grew 3 times what they would do naturally in 1 year. That's how good that stuff was. It was really, I mean, I put it on when I first did my landscape in my house, and overnight I had a jungle.
We need to create a market. Well, my wife is going to be in on that. I can just see me going out there and getting cake.
Did you have trouble getting rid of the composting? Or were you using all of it?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Peralta, we do have a little bit of issue getting rid of the composting, only because it's very, very difficult to bring it up to a Class A standard. It takes a lot of effort and energy to bring it to meet that that standard. So therefore, it turned out to be a Class B fertilizer, which is very difficult to get rid of because nobody wants a Class B fertilizer.
Okay.
So yes.
Cheers, Mayor.
I got some new evergreens, so I'm all for the fertilizer.
You want some cake?
I want some cake.
I was just wondering, sludge, this is human waste?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman, yes, it is.
Yeah, because I have my appointment to go tomorrow. I wish I had done this sooner than tomorrow, since we're voting tonight. I just can't stand the thought of it being in the landfill here.
It is very, very difficult to imagine. However, once you witness the process and the level of testing and the frequencies of testing of the product before, during, and after is a little settling, and that's why I'm offering tours of the wastewater treatment facility to whomever's asking, so that they could see the process. I mentioned to the landfill board that the wording of sludge does terrify people versus something like a modified something else. And I agree with you. It is it is a little bit scary to envision sludge going into a landfill or into any other processing plant.
And then the 16,000 on the amendments, what exactly does that compromise, or what does it make? What is it paying for?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Cantu, basically that 62,000 is to pay the tipping fee at the Rio Rancho landfill. It's our fee to dispose of it at their landfill, is basically what it is.
Just like if you took trash to our landfill, that's what you paid it.
So, that said, any further discussion? What's the wishes of
Move for approval.
Second.
motion and a second? For- On this item, there's not. Well, I mean, if you want to make a public comment, I'll allow that. Go ahead, come forward.
Sure,
I think you made the public comment already.
I did make a public comment, but obviously nobody took it to effect, you know what I mean? So it's just like I'm here against the concept saying that the composting is the best form of disposal of this product, you know? And that actually it's not that expensive to do this correctly so that you can get a Class A permit. And I talked to the environmental department down in Santa Fe and they agreed with this. They said, you know, yeah, Santa Fe's doing it. What's so hard about that?
Counselor, did you have?
Well, Melissa, I hear what you're saying, but what's so hard about it is the cost we're looking at, the cost of composting, the fact that there's not a market. I suppose if we had a few extra bucks, we could, as Mr. Bellis just told me a second ago, start fertilizing the mesa. So,
You guys are taking it honestly, good night.
well, please keep coming back.
So we do have a motion on the floor, we do have a second. Any further discussion? If none, Counselor Peralta?
Mr. Mayor, just, you know, if in the future we decide we're going to do something else with this stuff, that's fine. But right now, until we do something else, we have to dispose of it.
Right.
And all this does is gets rid of what we're producing right now, and we can't not get rid of it, or we close the plant.
And French, alternatives, you're constantly looking for alternatives to this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, a month down the road, there might be a new alternative that comes up that we can revisit.
Yes.
Okay, so call for the vote.
I'm sorry, Mayor, council members, I didn't hear the motion or the second.
There was a motion by Council Peralta, a second by Councilor
Oh.
Gonzalez.
Okay. Councilmember Cantu?
No.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Peralta?
Yes.
Councilmember Han?
Yes.
So then we'll go on to our next item, item C, Griffin and Associates, Mr. Bellis.
Just remember, counselors, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Oh, that is like so bad.
Consideration and possible approval of contract TT 1501.
That was wrong.
You can produce your cake, but you don't want to eat it.
Yeah, you don't want to eat that one.
You can make it, but you don't want to eat it.
I was going to ask you, are those? You will make it. Is those the vegetables you were trying to?
Gentlemen, this is a copy of an email I sent out a little earlier today, which was an update to, slight update to the contract proposed by Jacob for the renewal on a month-to-month basis to Griffin Associates of the existing contract. And I attached in there a copy of the adjusted budget, which Joni Griffin was put together and was happy with, and she asked for only one change, which is identified in the contract on page 2, 5B, which was the reduction, actually, of the administrative fee slightly to a maximum. We had 15% in there, which came out a little higher, I think like 52,000, And she asked that be reduced to $48,000 annually, or $4,000 a month. As I explained in the letter, while it is a month-to-month contract for convenience, more than likely what we will do is extend her through the summer season to at least September, probably till the end of the year, because we have to put our marketing campaigns together a season in advance. I also included in the back of that a tourism marketing and advertising project proposed timeline, which includes not just this contract, but the events. Councilman Gonzalez had some questions. And in the process of wanting to keep everybody informed of what we're trying to do long-term, townwide on the Plaza and for marketing and the economy in general. It gives you sort of an outline, so if there are any projects on there later that you have concern about. I also added on the back of that a copy of the graph generated by our finance department as the last page of the municipal lodgers tax for 2010 to 2014. And I asked Marietta to highlight those sectors that had not risen, despite the fact that we seem to have a 10% increase in revenues generally, that the one sector that has underperformed, despite the economic recovery, has been accommodations, beverage, basically the hospitality industry. And I do want the council to be aware, because I know a number of you have received phone calls that have said that that I have delayed the process or intervened in the process. First, let me say that all bills were being paid, and there's actually still money in the account for the current contract to be spent, so that is not correct. What we have done is examine the process, because there were representations made as to the increases we were seeing, either in hits on websites or in lodgers tax. And in fact, if you look at that graph, in general, lodgers tax collections have declined over the past 4 years, with the exception of the current year, which now, since February, is below the prior 3 years as well. So I don't, in fairness to the contractor and to the people involved, who I think are doing they're trying their hardest, we haven't had very many standards to measure the contract by. You'll notice in this contract, we actually have a performance standard. They were asking for a 2% increase over prior year performance in statistics. And we're putting another number of mechanisms in place, which if you read that timeline, it'll describe for measuring. But it is an industry generally in an important part of our industry generally in decline that we want to address. So that makes how we market, how much we spend on marketing, the demographics of what part of the population we target even more important.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor?
Rick, can I ask just a question with regards to the month-to-month? Typically, I mean, and being a business owner that advertises, I come to find that typically buying advertising a month before a target date isn't, and I'm doing it on a smaller scale with our local, advertising, isn't probably the wisest thing to do, because A, you're not going to get the best rate, and B, you're not going to get the best spots.
Yeah.
How smart is that of us?
Yeah, Councilman, we're not actually doing that. That's why there's a budget in here for $96,000, which represents a full 1/4 of the contract.
So they're able
And,
to forecast at least a few maybe 2 months out. in
Yeah,
advance.
it's less the concern about going month to month now, and more having the ability that if we get to September and we're not ready and we do have a good media buy or a campaign that's working, that we can extend it without having to come back. That we can verbally give her the okay to buy a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance.
Okay.
Anything else, Rick?
No, that's it, Mayor.
Council?
Move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
We have a motion to approve. We have a second.
I'll second.
We have a second by Councilor Cantu. Any further discussion? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Cantu?
Yes.
Councilmember Peralta?
Yes.
Councilmember Han?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Bellis. Go ahead and do update from town manager, updates on the town manager on the arts and crafts fairs and other activities on Taos Plaza, Carson Park, and other town locations.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, Council. This, no action on this item, just to report to you that currently we have changed the policy on the approval of activities particularly for the Plaza in Kit Carson, that go through the town manager first. We're trying to develop a master calendar. It seemed like between the planning department and facilities, and there was some confusion, and then in some cases there were activities that the mayor's office or myself didn't find out about till people were yelling at us. So for political reasons, we would like to know about these activities first. Also, as we move forward to do some larger economic development activities that might take the whole park, such as a music festival, we need to have some flexibility to keep some dates open. But there has been continuing concern received by the mayor and myself, and I'm sure most of you as council people, both about activities on the plaza, what people want, what people don't want, when they want it, how often, as well as with that suggestion being then move that stuff to the park, business owners having concerns about how often, particularly craft fairs, how often, who's having them, what's being sold, and also questioning, possibly rightfully so, and I'll leave that more to legal counsel, as to whether the town is in exchange getting a fair value if we're having someone pay a $100 fee to reserve the whole park for craft fair, and it costs us 3 or 4 times that more in cleaning up the park and overtime for the facilities department, which is pretty stretched. So my suggestion is that we're going to take a look at the use policies that are currently in effect, try to get some input from the business community, the arts community, everybody that's involved, and craft a policy that I don't think will satisfy everybody, but hopefully will address some of those concerns.
Councilor Peralta?
This has been a concern of mine as far as the value that we're getting for the use of these facilities. And $100 just doesn't cut it. And some of the things that I have talked about is because in many cases these vendors aren't paying any gross receipts tax. So we're losing the gross receipts tax because Tax and Revenue doesn't know they exist. And they're not coming around and checking the vendors for licensing and that sort of stuff. So in lieu of what loss the town may be receiving in tax value for these sales, because that's what they're going to come to you and say, well, we sell all this and we're paying all these taxes, and we know they're not. But in lieu of that, I think we need to be charging a booth space besides the rental in the facility. And secondly, we should be charging a large deposit for cleanup. And if they don't clean up after themselves, then they don't get it back. And that'll pay for our cleanup. So I think there's some things that are normally done in these areas. I know when I was at the State Fair, we charged a large cleanup fee, and we charged a substantial amount of money for the use of facilities. For example, during the fair, you paid for your booth space to the fairgrounds, and it was a substantial amount. And we also had Tax and Revenue on site collecting the taxes from the sales daily, because they didn't trust the vendors there. So I'm not saying this just out of pocket. I mean, just to say it, but I'm just saying it from experience that these are some of the things that go on, and people know about them. And so if we're going to get a fair value for what we're doing and providing these things, then they have to pay.
Councilor Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and fellow councilmen and women. I've put a lot of research into this. I've been hearing about this issue since before we were elected. Here are the facts. Here are facts. There are 6 craft fairs a year, 2 by the Chamber of Commerce, 2 by Blue Skies, 2 by CAV. Up until this year, for the previous 3 years, the Chamber, Blue Skies, and CAV had their craft fairs on non-holiday weekends. This was a holiday weekend, and for some reason, unbeknownst to me, it occurred, and the representatives of Blue Skies have waited patiently all night. I'd like to give them a chance to present to us. They've waited, been tortured by us now for 5 or 6 hours. But let me just finish with these facts. So I'm not sure how the weekend of Memorial Day was approved or who approved it. It may have gone through the DRC committee, I'm not sure. Here are the facts. 2/3 of crafts fair people are from New Mexico. 80% of those are from Taos County. All of them must apply with the craft fair organizer. There's an application process that CAV, the Chamber, and Blue Skies does. They all must show their gross receipts, tax, and declare it. If they do not have a gross receipts number, they come over to the utility department and get one. Real easy to do.
Doesn't necessarily.
Councilman, I have the floor. I understand you don't agree with me, but you should state it publicly, not privately.
Go ahead.
I interrupted you, I'm sorry.
Okay. Interestingly enough, before the recession, we had 90+ craft tents per fair. As the craft fair organizer population has aged, and as a result of the recession, that's now dropping down to about an average of 40 or 45. And if you drove by this weekend, you saw that the park was not as vigorously used as it has been in the past. The Chamber of Commerce did the craft fair during the Mother's Day concert, and our own chamber, had serious problems with that event. Agreements made, from what I understand, in DRC by the band or the organizer of the bands was not strictly adhered to. Parking was not adhered to. The craft fair suffered. So that is an issue, the Mother's Day issue, that we're going to have to look into seriously, I think, next year. But the Chamber of Commerce organizer of that crafts fair felt pretty well dismissed, that is, put down by the Mother's Day bands and so on. Not the bands, the organizer. There is great concern about where our Yuletide craft fair is going to happen this year. So that's something that I'm not I didn't look for it on the list, Rick, of events, but that's rearing its head. In addition to going through an application process and gross receipts, the craft fair people, organizers, must provide their own security. It starts Friday, goes through the weekend. That costs about $800 to provide that security. They must rent their own toilets and sinks, and that's a couple $100. 80% of their sales are check and credit card. I found that to be very interesting, because that then implies that they are paying their gross receipts. So in talking with brick and mortar people, I'm a brick and mortar guy too. The quote was, "We've thrown you under the bus." Well, no. Actually, I'm very disappointed there's no brick and mortar people here to go through this torturous event. I believe what the previous council told them, and correct me, Councilman Gonzalez or Peralta if I'm wrong, is if you guys don't figure this out, we will figure it out for you, and you're not going to like it. Well, that's the stage we're at. I've talked with Plaza owners, and they, interestingly enough, don't have big issues with farmers market. I talked to one jeweler this weekend, and he said, you know, for it's over Memorial Day, I should be doing $3,000 to $4,000 on a Sunday. I've had numerous customers come in, and they have told me, okay, I'm heading down the street to the crafts fair, I'll be back. Well, his receipts for that day was $175. So I feel the pain of brick and mortar. I do feel there is the possibility for a mediated compromise here. In talking with some crafts fair people, the average booth is $180. Here are the numbers. Your average sales for that 3-day weekend is $7,200, average. Less your sinks, less your security. Oh no, the average sales for the festival, I'm sorry, the whole festival, not a booth, is $7,200, $7,200 for a craft fair, less sinks, security, your organizational fees, leaving you with a net profit of around $4,600, and that's actually not true net because you haven't taken out your gross receipts yet. So when the Chamber of Commerce uses this as a benefit or fundraiser or community against violence, we're not talking about a whole boatload of money here. When Blue Skies does theirs, and they're going to present to us in just a minute, it'll be interesting to see how their numbers jive. We're not talking about a whole lot of buckage. So my question to brick and mortar then is, if over 3 days a festival grosses $7,200, and I have some anecdotal evidence to show that there is brick and mortar pain, well, that doesn't jive. That doesn't jive. That number does not jive, 7,200 gross, as hurting brick and mortar to a great extent. So I'm feeling like this. And actually now I've talked to some crafts people who make beautiful art, and they actually sell their art in some pretty high-end galleries, and they have an agreement where they come down to the park and they sell their art there, but it's different stuff, so that there's not a conflict. And they said pre-recession, we could count on booming Taos craft fairs. But since then, it's been a steep decline. They had some suggestions, and here they are, which nobody's going to like. One suggestion is, have we reached satiation with craft fairs? Do we need to drop to the point where we have just one Chamber of Commerce, one CAV, one Blue Sky? It's an idea. They suggested not doing anything over the holidays, Memorial Day, Labor Day. CAV does one on the 4th of July. So those were some middle-of-the-road suggestions. Many crafts people feel that the market has satiated. Where they used to be very special, unique events, they've kind of taken on a one-size-fits-all. They feel a compromise with brick and mortar would be, okay, we're not going to do any holiday, no craft fairs on holidays. Okay? Are you happy now? No craft fairs on holidays. As Tom McCarthy said, not too many years ago. It takes us all year long. We carry our employees all year long during the down winter months. Finally, the first big holiday of the season hits where we can finally start to break even, and a craft fair just took a lot of my revenue. Now, I question that because it doesn't add up numerically, but got to ask the question. So a mediated solution may be no holidays, and see if brick and mortar people can be happy with that. So it looks very positive, I think, for a farmer's market in the plaza. And the craft fair people have said, hey, let the farmer's market come over to the park with us. We'd love it. Now, I don't know how Blue Skies feels, but the people I talk to about it, and they have their own thing to say. I'm not their spokesman. But the craft fair people did feel very positive about having the farmer's market and craft fair happening at the same time. So there's room for movement here. We can do our citizens. We can be fair. We want, I think, Blue Skies to survive. We want CAV to survive and the chamber. It may be a simple deal. This whole issue may have come up simply because somebody got a contract for a holiday weekend. That's it from me. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Please.
I'm all in favor of craft fairs. And when I was mayor, there was the concern by the brick and mortar people to move them off the plaza, and I refused. I said, we're not going to do it. It brings people to the plaza and it helps. And I can tell you in those days, the economy was not hurting with the brick and mortar people, and the crafts fair people were doing fine. But the brick and mortar people didn't want them there, and I refused to remove them. So when they were moved last year, the 6 crafts fairs that were moved were the ones you spoke of. There were other crafts fairs that were going on in the park, but those 6 were on the plaza. As a compromise to moving them off the plaza, was to allow them to have their crafts fairs on holiday weekends. The plaza merchants at that time indicated to us that getting them off the plaza and putting them in the park was fine. They just didn't want them on the plaza. So as long as they were in the park, they didn't care. What you're indicating now is that there is care about whether they're on a holiday weekend or not. But that was part of the compromise. It says, okay, we will not have them on the plaza, but they can have the holiday weekends. And that was what we decided there. I still think, though, that there should be more revenue coming to the town for arts and crafts. That's just all I'm saying. Okay. And because I have a CRS number doesn't necessarily mean that I make it my reports.
Councilor?
Well,
And this, I'm sorry, but this has nothing to do with the organizers. This has to do with the individual merchants that are in the crafts fairs.
and on another note, with regards to the arts and crafts fairs, it was all about the brick and mortar, and how much they felt they expended on a monthly basis in solid fixed costs, as you know, and individuals that reaped benefits. I mean, and if the data's there, I mean, that doesn't lie, with regards to the amount of money that's being pulled in one direction or the other. It was just a sentiment that, you know, they had done a poll, and they had polled each and every plaza vendor with regards to what their sales looked like on arts and crafts fair weekends versus non-arts and crafts fair weekends, and what that equated to. So, like Councilor Peralta said, there was, you know, some compromise in there that said, look, holiday weekends wouldn't be excluded, but you wouldn't be able to use the plaza, you know, for arts and crafts fairs. To me, and this is the personal feeling, is that any draw that we can get to the plaza is a good draw. And I personally, I don't understand how it hurts a business, and maybe because my business is very different from that of a art gallery or somebody that sells, you know, arts wares. For me, maybe I would have a fence if the town allowed a window company to set up shop right across from mine for a weekend. you know, but that's neither here nor there because it's not what we're talking about. But just like Councilor Peralta said, that was the history as to how the previous council came to the conclusion that arts and crafts fairs would no longer be held on the plaza themselves. It was a sentiment outcry from the merchants themselves, the brick and mortar merchants, that made that appeal to us. Just real quickly on the Yuletide Arts and Crafts Fair, that was taking place inside Baton Hall. Problem is we don't have Baton Hall anymore. This is where we came to that crossroads of saying we expense $500,000 on a facility that generates $25,000 worth of revenue a year. How much, you know, fiscal responsibility sense does that make, you know, for the city? And, you know, again, back to this budget thing of how tight we are in budget to begin with. It's just a hard pill to swallow. I attended the Yuletide Arts and Crafts Fair every year. My wife made me. But difference was when you sit down and look at actual realized losses out of it, it's just, we couldn't continue to sustain at that level. So, just FYI.
Yuletide Arts and Crafts Fair was run by the town, and it was losing $16,000 a year, not including the cost for the facility and security and all that sort of stuff. Just the cost of the revenues for the advertising was done and expenses for running it. It was $16,000 in the hole every year. It just wasn't worth running. And we said, if somebody else wants to run it, let them.
Please, I guess you guys are here to speak on this. Thank you.
Still awake. Barely.
See y'all again.
Yeah.
And just start with your names just for the record. So
I'm Jody Madden.
And I'm Vicki McFadden.
We're Blue Skies Production.
correct.
Okay.
And let's make sure your mic's are on, because I'll just bet you my last $10 that there are a lot of people waking up to listen in on this conversation.
Okay.
And we'll hear from them in about an hour.
Yeah. And that's okay. We want to hear
One of them
from
anyway.
We want to hear them.
Okay, I don't know. Do you want to start?
Well, there are a few issues that were raised. Yes, indeed, on 1991, we were on the plaza. We had a complaint, Charlie's Corner, and it was also it was a Memorial Day weekend. The park was surrounded by motorcycles, and because of the difficulty with businesses being opposed to it, the motorcycles all over the place, we elected to go to Kit Carson Park. Strangely enough, I make jewelry. I was in 2 galleries at the time, both on the plaza. I did more business in my galleries on the weekends that I had arts and craft shows than I did on any other weekends through the galleries. I also was selling my stuff on the plaza, and I did well, but never did as well as I did when there was that proximity. The decision that Mr. Peralta and Mr. Gonzalez, with the rest of the town council, made to allow us to have our show again in Kit Carson Park was a great relief to us, because we actually believe in the show. There's a reason we do what we do, because we were asked to. We didn't enter arts and craft shows promotion as a business pursuit. We were approached by other artists to put on an arts and craft show. That's the only reason we got into it. And I wanted to have an arts and craft show in my hometown that I could attend. I didn't want to have to go to Dallas. I didn't want to have to go to Denver. I wanted to be here, and that's how we got started. And we've been trying to maintain, uniquely, a high-quality event. We were the first promoters to ever advertise, to provide any of the amenities that you had mentioned that all the people do, which they don't. All of the promoters do not get porta potties. All of them do not provide the professional security that we have always done. We have always balanced the participants in our shows, and we have always struggled to maintain a quality professional environment. The people who participate in our shows are professionals. These are not people that knit at home and love doing that and get this one opportunity a year to do that, as, let's say, many people do at Yuletide. Yuletide has not required a jury CRS. They have not required from their participants that they were registered with the state to pay taxes. We have always maintained that as a necessity for their involvement in our show. Now, we can't do anything to force them to pay, or much like you folks can't, to have local businesses, brick and mortar, pay. To say that one group does and one group doesn't, I honestly have a difficulty with that. I don't know people that don't do that. I'm sure that there are. And I think that's the most I would like to say. Thank you, Vicki.
It's okay. Well, I just wanted, let me see. I wanted to address the issue, because we've been, it's been said that, oh, these arts and crafts shows, this is jewelry, jewelry, jewelry. Well, in our show, as Jody had said, we do try and balance things out. And in fact, I do have the numbers on the show that we just did. Firstly, it was a very small and intimate show. We had 37 participants. 28% were jewelers. 72% were from New Mexico. And that was another issue that was always claimed, that, oh, that everyone, all of these out-of-towners, you know. But no, they're people from here. They're people from down the road. And there are a few from Arizona and Colorado. And I find that to be a plus, because now we have people coming into town who are staying in hotels and motels and are spending more money while they're here. So, what I just, oh, what was it that we went to mention this? We have just been granted the right, after 3 years, to have Memorial Day weekend show again, once again. And I feel, oh my goodness, are we going to be, you know, is it going to be taken away again? Our advertising starts now for next year. You know, our applications go out now for next year. So we need to know what's going on. We've been doing this, we're going into our 26th year. And these are people who are, I mean, this is their livelihood. This is what they do. This is how they feed their families. You know, it's every day. It's an everyday process.
And one other thing is,
I'm not done.
oh.
Yeah, but go ahead.
In order for an arts and crafts show to be effective, and we got into it as a result of the Spring Arts Festival, Feeney Lipscomb and that group back then. And the idea was that the business didn't start on Memorial Day weekend. It started much later. And that the Spring Arts was to start business earlier. And that it is a great catalyst for bringing people to a community and keeping them here. And we've experienced that ourselves at our own show. Just the accidental person driving through Taos on their way to Santa Fe, seeing an arts and crafts show, and then ending up spending the day and night here because they were delayed by something that was interesting. But in order to make an arts and crafts show effective, it takes long-term planning and the confidence that you're going to be able to turn your marketing into a real product and being an effective arts and crafts show. And there are great arts and crafts shows around the country. We've always felt that that's what we would like to be able to do in Taos. Of course, we've had these goofy economies over the past, 12 years or so that have just been very difficult to be able to manage. And then, of course, the last several years where we were shut out of maintaining something that we'd been working on for a long time.
I just wanted to mention some of the businesses that we deal with, you know, that we are it's directly related to the show. We spend money with Smith's Food Market, Sid's Food Market, Ace Hardware, Randall's Hardware, the Taos News, High Desert Security, Town of Taos, Bob's Yard, Brown & Brown Insurance, El Pueblo Lodge, Comfort Suites, Quality Inn, the local gas stations, and then of course, the artists that are here. They're going out to eat in the various restaurants. There's just so much money that comes from this event. It's something they look forward to and plan for, you know, every single year. We're going into our 26th year. Why stop now? I don't understand that. It's, you know, it's their livelihood, and that's the thing that gets to me, you know.
Thank you very much.
Well, and I think, Mr. Mayor, one thing I think is pretty interesting is, you know, now that you were, you know, kind of just disseminating information with regards to where artists were coming from and whatnot. One of the biggest, I guess, detractors of arts and crafts fairs on the plaza was herself at an arts and crafts fair showing in Santa Fe.
Well, actually,
on the plaza.
So many of the people who used to participate have businesses all over Taos, several on the plaza, several in John Dunn, and some of them, oddly enough, are in opposition to us.
Right.
The very thing that got them started. And at our shows that we promoted, I mean, not just at other arts and crafts shows, but
Right, they started with us.
almost everybody started with us. And
So now they're shopkeepers
it's not like we're against it.
That's
Vicky
it.
was a shopkeeper. You know, Vicky had One World on Kit Carson Road. It's not like we're opposed to it.
Well, there's, Mr. Mayor, if I could, there's a number of your crafts people that I know that do as you did, and they have their goods within shops and also participate in crafts fairs.
Yes.
So it's not like, you know, it's one or the other, so it works both ways. They look at it and saying, you know, these crafts fairs hit individuals who normally wouldn't go into their shops. That's what they feel. And in other cases, they say, well, this is one way that I can promote what I've got in my shops as well.
Well, another aspect, I feel that some people have a kind of businesses have a low self-esteem, that they think that that all the money, that people come here with $100 in their pocket. And my experience is people that are going to walk into several of the businesses I'm familiar with, or if they're going to buy from me, don't exactly have an unlimited source of income or ability to spend money. But most of them have many credit cards that are very accessible. The people that go through arts and crafts shows are not here to buy one thing. They're here to shop. And they didn't set a limit of 10 grand to shop in Taos. Maybe they set a limit for their trip. But it's not like we're going to hurt anybody because they're going to buy, the people buy what they like. I mean, that's fundamentally how retail works. People buy what they like, and if they like it, they'll buy it, and if they walk into a store, they're going to buy that too. Nobody's going to be discouraged because or feel that they can't afford several things that are on the plaza because they were at an arts and crafts show. It'll probably stimulate their interest in spending money because that's how shopping happens.
Oh, also, I just wanted to say that there's a number of local businesses that deal with the artists. They buy from them wholesale for their shops. And, I mean, that's a great exchange right there, you know? It's just so positive.
Vicki and Jody, I want to thank you for your patience and coming in and speaking in such a good way. I have some questions. Who in the town? I heard Councilman Peralta say go ahead, start using weekends, but I mean holidays. But who in the town actually permitted the use of the park on Memorial Day weekend?
You mean this year?
Yeah, because you haven't been able to use it.
For 3 years.
Right, so the Parks Department was given, notified that because of the town council ruling, it was like September or August last year?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
In fact, I don't know that the Parks Department knew about that ruling, but I told the Parks Department because I was pretty excited. And so I sent our application to the Parks Department, and I sent a fax of the application to the Parks Department phone number.
Oh, I thought he was asking permission. It was the council.
Well, the council gave permission.
Well, they made a decree, so to speak, but I'm kind of a nuts and bolts guy.
Yeah.
I like to see really how it works. And so there seems to be a disconnect with the request, the developmental review committee, planning and zoning. Steve, you're raising your hand. Do you have can you enlighten me on this?
Any request for space at the Kit Carson Park or the Plaza goes through the facilities department, there's the parks department in Gilbert. So there's a form online, the form's filled out and it's turned in. The way we did it, the way it's done is that in January of each year, anyone that wants to use the space at the parks or the plaza submits a request. They fill it out first come, first serve. As long as it's not political or religious in nature, that's pretty much the policy. And then because of the council guidance, it was any 365 days a year, I think, was what the notice from the council meeting said. So Arts and Crafts Fairs as of 2014 can be held in Kit Carson Park on any day this year, as long as there wasn't a reservation already in place.
And so I sent my application in on January 1st at about 12:05 a.m. And there was one thing I wanted to say regarding something Councilor Peralta had raised. The park was clean. The park is always clean after Blue Skies. Nobody spends a minute cleaning up Kit Carson Park after we're done.
Any of our shows.
And I, whether it is Dennis or Gilbert, and they've, you know, that's from the very beginning. The first time we did the show in the Plaza, I swept the entire plaza and took everything and dumped it into garbage containers. It was cleaner after we were done than when we started.
As a matter of fact, yeah,
and there are many times that when we're doing a show, there might have been a show 2 weeks prior, we will find debris from the previous show, and I clean it up. And I think the Parks Department and the employees at the Parks Department can not only confirm that, but that we assist in maintaining the park and their work. This time I didn't have as much time as I would have liked to, but we had to, because of the rain, I had to put down a bark. Normally I would use straw, but I spent yesterday raking the bark up and disposing of it into the containers that were available. And we have always had great respect for the park. I have fertilized this section of the park, me personally, with our own fertilizer. I had machines brought in to thrash, where you go and you dig up the old grass, for that part of the park at our expense.
We simply
and
did it because
because
could.
I didn't know what to do with the park.
Yeah.
I asked Dennis, when Dennis was running it, can we like pay you guys or do something? Because they were so helpful. And he said, no, if we get money, it goes to the town. And so the first thing I did was buy him Cokes. But then after that, I thought, well, I'll do something for the park. And so that's how we've always felt about it. Of course, it's selfish. You know, I want the park to look good for us, but I also want the park to be good, and I would like to see more people in the park. And I think when the park has been disregarded, that fewer people come to the park and use it.
I just wanted to say something about the fees. It's not $100. It depends how many days you're using it, and is it 100 a day? But I'm just saying that's the least of our expense. You know, it cost. I mean, it cost a lot to put the show on. You know, we're not making big bucks. I also have a part-time job.
So Vicki, the park fees are $100 a day?
Is it 100 a day for the park?
I don't know.
I know, yeah.
Okay.
And of course we pay, oh yeah, we also have banner fees.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of,
So I guess one concern I have, Steve and Martha, is do we have a disconnect with an applicant going through the process and obtaining the use of the park? Sounds like we shouldn't, but it also sounds like we've had a hiccup.
Councilman, I think if you're referring to the issue with the Chamber of Commerce and other statement, because the Chamber of Commerce had part of the park closed, the Parks and Grass area.
And maybe you should speak in the thing.
And then the concert was added, so I think this is the first time we've had the Mother's Day concert at Kit Carson Park, so there were issues with that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, the arts and crafts fairs are, I mean, they are the same ones.
So
And
we've got a good bureaucratic system set up that's
I believe we
relatively
do, yes.
streamlined, but okay.
I mean, we had issues with the Mother's Day event, but I think it was because it was their first time and they
Right.
weren't really sure about
Right.
what to do. And
You know, Mr. Bellis, in some of my research, what appeared this weekend regarding the farmer's market was, please allow cars, please maintain handicap parking. And so this is just Fritz thinking, bringing my gardening stuff in to sell at the market, I'm gonna bring my load in, drop it off, and go park down at the cow's pasture or over at Our Lady. But however we organize that, parking is gonna be an issue. And we do not, and the same goes for our beloved brick and mortar people. Thou shalt not park in front of your own store. Period. 758-9585. That's my home number. Do not park in front of your own store. Anyway, just a thought. Now, let me throw a curveball at you, Vicki
Yes.
and Joey. Steve, thank you. In looking for compromise, and you don't necessarily have to give an answer tonight, but you've got my phone number. and I appreciate your response on this. How do you feel about letting go of holidays?
Oh, I can
One.
tell you right now.
Well, okay, go ahead, suck it to me.
We had to let
That happened to us in 2010. And the town council voted to stop all holiday shows, as they said. On the other hand, there was still a show on Thanksgiving, there was still a show on the 4th of July, but overall, they said that all the holiday shows were stopped, but strangely, only Blue Skies production shows were stopped on Memorial Day and Labor Day. Now, we started Labor Day many years after we had started the Memorial Day show with a really good reason. We used to participate in a show put on in Santa Fe by the Fiesta Council, and they have two events, Labor Day and Fiesta. They were, for us, a most uncomfortable situation. The promoter was not friendly, and it was a very difficult event to participate in. I simply stopped doing it for its own sake. I didn't have another event to participate in. I just couldn't take doing their show anymore. After several years, I considered, I bet there are a lot of people who feel like me, and that there are a lot of people in Santa Fe at that time. So we started to develop the show, and we advertised it in Santa Fe, trying to get the Santa Fe people who would possibly be there to attend the Arts and Crafts show to come up to Taos. Our first year was wickedly successful, and strangely enough, when I went to ask Dennis if we could rent it again, he told me it was already rented. However, I'd been told before that you're basically grandfathered and you rent the park in December. And I was just telling him I wanted to. And I said, well, so who rented it? Who could rent it out from under us? And he said, the Chamber of Commerce. They're going to put on a show now on Labor Day. After we had developed the show, I mean, I don't know how much time we spent in just getting it going and figuring it out, that there's the Chamber going to take our show. I joined the Chamber. That was the answer. They couldn't take a show from somebody who was a member.
So, thank you, Jody. So I hear you saying, we worked hard to get these holidays we'd like to keep.
I think what the holidays do is bring people to Taos and keep them here. I think the shows are profoundly effective for the entire town.
I hear you. So let me ask you this other volatile question, and that is, since our trend line over the years has been less,
yes,
twice as much work for, how do you feel, and other craft fair people out there, how do you feel about reducing the number of fairs?
Seems like it's a natural.
And create a big slam bam thing.
Well, we didn't really have a choice. It just kind of shrunk all by itself. But how do I feel about it?
Well, instead of having two, right?
One big show.
One massive. I remember back in the day when our kids were, when the craft fair came into town, it was like a big deal. Now, from my personal perspective, and this is purely subjective and anecdotal, they're here every week. What's the big deal?
Right. So in that, indeed, in that sense.
Satiated.
That's why I didn't understand why more, if people had been feeling this way for a while, why were more fairs allowed? And just recently, what is it? The Lilac Festival. It's a craft show.
Last weekend.
You know, I mean, I didn't understand that, you know. But also, I just have a question, and it has to do with this survey that was taken about the merchants on the plaza. There was a survey done by the town, by the council members and the mayor, and they went around the plaza
Oh, they did.
to find out how they felt about the arts and craft fairs. And the result came back. We came to that meeting, and the consensus was it didn't matter either way. But
You know about this survey, Steve?
Yes, sir.
You do?
yeah,
Steve
Wonderful.
did it. Steve participated.
I kind of like the results. The town manager put the survey together at the request of the mayor and the council. There was about 10 questions on it. It was a one-page survey.
right,
And it actually was about 50-50, as I recall.
exactly.
I had the results. It's in the council minutes.
50/50 what?
50% of the merchants on the plaza were okay with there being craft fairs on the plaza, and 50 were indifferent or against.
Right. Actually,
Indifferent
it's about 40.
or against? I mean, that's three categories. Indifferent means I don't care.
Well, 50-50, or against.
Yeah, okay.
It's been
But-
a while, but that's my recollection.
And that wasn't the people on the strip going down north or?
The plaza itself, and it was the Jimmy Gun shops,
Uh-huh.
but nothing past Bent Street, this side of Bent Street.
Nothing past that, okay.
And when we were shut down in 2010, I made up a petition, and I went to 50 businesses in about 2 hours, none of which were on the plaza. And I think I had 2 people that wouldn't sign it. And they all the other businesses supported us. So we had 50 signatures of business owners supporting arts and craft shows on in Kit Carson Park on Labor Day and Memorial Day weekends.
So this truly is a Solomon kind of decision, Dan. You know, we want to support our brick and mortar. We want to support our entrepreneurial artists. I have relatives who are craftspeople.
Yes, I know.
I have relatives who are brick and mortar. So I'm really trying to find a middle road here. And I'm just looking,
I think we're the middle road.
maybe so.
And
But I
Councillor,
think I've said enough. Thank you.
yeah, and Councillor, I thank you for bringing this forward because, again, you know, we talked about moving the fair, the farmer's market to the plaza, and I mean, my phone hasn't quit ringing since we are trying to find an avenue to move it somewhere. We don't want to lose that. We want to keep it revitalizing our downtown area. We want to keep something in the heart of town. You know, at some point, we have to, you know, we want something happening in our community. And I know that it's gonna, I talked to the chief has some recommendations. If we're gonna do it, I know the council wants it down there. He has some recommendations, you know, if we're gonna, you know, you mentioned keeping the street open. You know, I think a portion of the street can be kept open. I don't know that the whole plaza can be kept open because of the number of people that are gonna be down there. But I think there's gonna be a meeting on Thursday, I think, to address that. I believe, is that right, Rick? And again, it's one of those issues. I have been at the Yuletide. I've showed several times at the Yuletide. I attend the crafts fairs. I've seen both of these people there. I continue to do it. I mean, I don't know what to say. We need to find more issues that we want to bring back to revitalize the downtown area. I know Councillor Cantu has been very proactive in meeting with several people to see if, make sure that that Orno is up and running and will actually fire bread or actually can cook in it. So that's something that she's working at. Again, revitalization of the downtown area is important to all of us. It's important to our to the bricks and mortar people downtown too. So there's going to be some decisions that I'm sure not everybody's going to be satisfied, but hopefully we can have a balance. So
That's the key, Mayor, balance.
Mr. Mayor, with
Council.
regards to the closure of the plaza on, you know, let's just say that farmer's market does end up down there. I think we've talked about safety-wise and whatnot. You know, for me, the amount of time that the farmer's market actually operates, which is 7 a.m. to noon, basically, maybe a little past, I don't think it would be a huge detriment. For me, it's about creating less drive-in, drive-out. I mean, you kind of see what happens on Civic Plaza when the farmer's market's happening here at the city, and it's, you know, traffic's just a mess. So for me, it's about creating that walking, you know, pedestrian-friendly environment so that people get the opportunity to pass by some of the shops, the brick-and-mortar shops, as opposed to just pulling into a parking space and taking right back off out. So for me, I'd rather see closure, and that includes, you know, even the few hours for Taos Plaza Live.
I have a comment too. I think this weekend with the farmer's market, or when it does begin, it's going to be the perfect experiment for everybody to get to learn from that. I'm really concerned about the parking for the merchants down there. I'm getting phone calls constantly from them, and they're really upset about it. And it also goes in conjunction with this position that we want to hire somebody for $45,000 a year. But I'd really like to see, when the arts and crafts shows are in the park, that there is an event in the plaza at the same time that's going to have people going from there to here and back and forth, so that it's a win-win situation for everybody. And you know, I personally would volunteer for getting involved in that and trying to bring attractions to the plaza, whether it's Native Americans or, you know, Hispanic music or dancers or whatever. So just wanted to pass that by you guys as well.
When we get that owner going, I'll donate the first half a pig.
Oh, we're gonna get it going.
You know, Mayor, Council, I would just make the comment that when you go to Taos Plaza Live, just stand on the edge of the road by the old courthouse. Watch the cars come down from the gorge. Figure out how many people that you keep that plaza open for actually stop or just want to kind of cruise around and keep on going. In 3 years, I've never seen a car actually stop. People cruise the plaza. That's part of the activity, but it doesn't add to the shopping whatsoever. What it does do is those merchants, like the chocolate factory that the kids run back and forth and back and forth across there, I think creates an unreasonable risk so that maybe people with kids don't stay on the plaza, and I've heard them say that. You know, I'm there for a while with my kids and it drives me nuts having to watch them, so I'll go home. And it's going to be one of those experiments. It's not like we're reinventing the first time there's been a plaza in North America. Activities on the plaza have gone on for 50 years because downtowns died in the competition with the malls and the big boxes, and you needed to create a new heart to the community again that brought people together, both tourists and, excuse me, also locals. And hopefully we can do that mix. The craft fairs, you know, it's one of those things where I don't have a dog in this fight. I mean, being responsible for over 30 years for downtown redevelopment, activity breeds activity. It has to be on a regular basis so that people know when to come, and people can plan for it. And whatever our solution is, we shouldn't keep switching it around, because it's difficult for the people that hold the events, and it's difficult for people to predict when things are going to be here. But I do think that based on what we did and for the marketing, what the Arts Council just did last weekend for holding their forum to get input, there seems to be a real receptive mood right now in the community to people wanting to come and show up and be heard. And I don't think that would hurt if we have sort of another forum on this and everybody can be included. I mean, it's you can understand some of the arguments of the merchants, because, you know, if I'm buying a painting from somebody who paints at home normally but comes to the crafts fairs, or a piece of jewelry or artwork, and they're selling it at the craft fair for maybe twice what it cost them to make, so they're selling it for $30. but the gallery owners are buying it and they're selling it for $300. Yeah, that's a little embarrassing to have somebody go to the craft fair and then walk into the gallery. But is that really our problem? And then you have to ask the gallery owners, well, why don't you have business? Maybe you've priced yourself out of the market. Maybe you're not selling the right product. And this is just going to be an interesting season of experimentation, but let's see what happens.
One last thing. It's just that there's so many aspects to the fairs or festivals. If you would go to our craft show, you will notice it's a time for people to visit with one another. I mean, sometimes I see people I haven't seen in 6 months, and that's where I see them. And it's a time for them to bring the children. It's a nice stroll through the park. Everybody's there with their dog. I mean, it's like a doggy parade, you know? And it's just more than a craft fair. It's so essential. It's a place where you'll see, you know, grandmas being rolled down the aisle. You know, it's okay. The wheelchair can go through. People are on their bikes, you know. It's wonderful. That's all I want to say. I don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll shut up.
Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
Thank you for waiting to speak. So, and Mr. Bellis, you know, I know this is not an action item, but you did make a recommendation. I think we need to visit that and get this worked out so that we have something to look for from, as I know.
You know, Mr. Mayor, I think one of the advantages of having a public forum like that is to have people go on the record and have to say what they really think in front of everyone, because as you and I are looking at each other and we're sitting here and we're hearing that certain people have said things to Councilman Hahn, which those same people came over to our offices to tell us that they thought it actually worked out in their favor, that Mother's Day and the Crafts Fair were there because they had more walk-through traffic than normally they would, and it's the most successful one they've had. But so you don't know what people are telling you, you know. Which one is it?
Okay.
What time is that meeting on Thursday?
It'll be at 6 o'clock. It'll be on the Plaza. And if there's inclement weather, which there's a chance of, we'll have it here in the council chambers.
And this is the merchants?
It's sort of an invitation only. It was just to the merchants around the plaza that we thought would be affected by it. And myself, the farmers market person, and the Main Street director have gone around and talked to about half of the businesses personally so far. And interestingly, we have not found one that was opposed to it. In fact, one of the gentlemen that was supposedly a stalwart against any activity actually said, what I would really like to see is, why don't you hold antique fairs, and that's what I sell is antiques, and that would bring in more business. And which went against the whole trend of, we were told, don't sell anything that I sell. You know, surprisingly, Indian Market, Santa Fe, guess who does the most business? The galleries that sell pottery and Native American memorabilia, collectibles.
So we don't need to be there unless we're invited.
No, it's
Great.
just to hear all sides. And to make the merchants aware, to give them a heads up of what the traffic plan will be.
Yeah.
And we should say that the chief has a meeting coming up with, meeting with the business community. Do you want to say when that is?
In fact, I sent out an email to the executive.
And council, you know, one of the things that came out from the TENS meeting is that that barrier across the road at any time detours from the plaza, and that's something that I wouldn't like to see, is the closing of the plaza entirely. You know, even if there was just one lane on that one side of the road, so people could actually drive through and think that there's something wrong with the plaza, because that's the message that the 10s brought to us. Well, how come the plaza's closed? Is there an issue? Has there been a shooting? Has there been something, you know, why is it closed? And again, I don't know if we're just not getting the message out, and if people could...
We're not advertising why it's closed
Right.
at the
Right.
at the barrier.
Right.
In other words, you should put out the barrier, farmer's market, 7 o'clock till 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Whatever is going on in the plaza we're closing it for, we should tell them why it's closed. And we don't do that. We just close it.
Yeah, and I think
So it looks like, yeah, who knows what's going on the plaza.
and the barricades typically say, closed to foot traffic, welcome to our event. But I think maybe just a little more, yeah.
That was
Or
something
So that's something that we can get addressed at that meeting, so.
we learned that on the Hopper Day situation, and we are looking at ways to string banners across that intersection right there and get DOT permission, which shouldn't be a problem, as well as the other entrances to the plaza, and I think that'll make it a more attractive, inviting atmosphere for people.
And that's the one thing that people actually said too, is during the Hopper Days, the minute that they closed the plaza, their business died. So I don't, you know, I'm sure you guys have heard the same thing, so we'll address
Well,
that.
I would, Mayor, I just want to say, because I know this is on television, having been there the whole day,
Yeah.
okay, it rained a little bit, and any of the honest businesses, and you heard a lady actually say that's on the plaza, that come 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, business dies no matter what you do. And the farmer's market will be from 8 to 1, and so far almost everybody we have surveyed on the plaza does not open on a Saturday till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, and said, to be honest with you, our traffic doesn't start till about noon or 1, and it goes till 3.
Okay, so we'll go on to the matters from mayor and council. Appointment of Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, appointment of the following individual to serve on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. And just, Mr. Bellis, turn to you.
Mr. Mayor, these are your recommendations based on two things. One is we surveyed the people that were already on committees and asked if they would like to continue to participate. We checked the terms, and then also opened it up to public solicitation for, I think, about 6 weeks. And these are committees which, two of the remaining committees, which you have made recommended appointments to in concurrence with, in the case of the Finance Committee, the recommendations also of the Finance Director. And you are presenting them to council for their concurrence. The committees we have not received, that are still remaining that we have not received enough letters for, are the Planning and Zoning, the Historic Commission, and the Lodgers Tax Advisory. And we've just gotten a few new ones in the last couple of days, so next meeting we'll have them for you.
So if you have any people that are wanting to serve or willing to serve, I recommend that you talk to them and have them submit their names with a letter of reference. Councilors? And Mr. Bellis, if you'll read into the record the names of the people that we're recommending for, or I'm recommending for adoption.
Mr. Mayor, the Recreational Advisory Committee, we're recommending Mark Yarovitz, Annette Bowden, Randolph Pierce, Shelley Barr, Debbie Friday Joggers, Ezra Bales, and Caitlin Legere. These are all currently members of that committee.
Mr. Mayor, Jake, if you're still with us over there, can we do the appointment of both committees in one motion?
We're going to actually...
No, you can't. I can't vote on the next one.
Oh, all right. Never mind.
So, yeah, that's why I... Okay.
Go back to sleep, sir.
So, council?
Move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I'm grateful that these folks volunteered, and we need more volunteers. Ask not what you can do for, how does that go?
Your town.
Your town.
What's your,
I think it's the other
Ask
way
not
around.
what your town can do for you, ask what you can do for your town. So thank you, Mark, Annette, Randolph, Shelley, Debbie, Ezra, Caitlin. Thank you.
thank you. So, call for the vote.
Councilmember Cantu? Yes. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Peralta?
Yes.
Councilmember Han?
Yes.
So we'll go on to item B, appointment of the Finance Audit Committee, appointment of the following individuals serve on the Finance Audit Committee, and Mayor Pro Tem Fred Peralta, Doug Schweinhardt from CPA Southwest, and is it Michelle Griego, the New Mexico Educators Credit Union. Council?
Move for approval, Mr. Mayor.
I have a second. I have a second by Councilor Cantu. Any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Councilmember Han?
Yes.
Councilmember Peralta?
Abstain.
Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yes.
Councilmember Cantu?
Okay. Council reports on committee assignments. Anybody attend anything that we need to make a report on? If not, we'll move on to adjournment.
Mr. Mayor,
We have a motion. Oh, Mr. Bellis, go ahead. Sorry.
just very quickly, before you adjourn, unfortunately he's not here, but I did want to point out that Conrad Cordova, who was the IT and MIS director for the county, has now come over in a similar capacity for us, and I think we're putting together a great management team. I think he's going to bring really help that department solidify, and we had some security issues, and you'll notice your iPads are all working as a result tonight.
Mine didn't work.
So, I guess that brings up,
And he worked on it.
At what point does Steve send the nasty letter to quit stealing his?
I think we've already had that conversation.
Okay.
Counselor? Okay, I just want to make one not announcement, but two reports. And I was just going to ask the council, and you don't have to do it at this meeting, but something to consider. I've been a member of the NCRTD board, and I'm asking the town to consider becoming a member of the NCRTD. There's collaboration that can happen. It doesn't cost the town anything to become a member. It just takes the asking the NCRTD board to become a member, and if they allow it, then we'd have a place on the board there in the event that there's some collaboration that can happen between the town and the NCRTD board. So, again, something for you guys to consider. It doesn't cost anything. It just takes a matter of a letter from the town wishing to be a member on that board. And I think that we're collecting a GRT within the community that I think we could possibly put to work for us. You have something else?
We had, as a council, we had talked about maybe, I think we had talked about maybe doing a daytime work-study council session where we could actually get into the meat and bones of this, meeting 6 to 8 hours, and then doing a once a month, and that would be an official council meeting, work-study, and then and then one evening meeting where maybe we could come in just pretty prepared so that we could move quickly through, giving the public an opportunity during the day for those night timers, and in the evening for those daytimers, day workers, to have access. But these long evening meetings are going to shorten all of our lives, and I'm ready for bed. So I'm pleading with you. Can we start scheduling? I'm willing to adjust my business however, but do some heavy lifting once a month during the day, and then have and that'll be a real council meeting, and then do a regular council meeting at night.
I think even staff would love that, Counselor.
I'm all for that, because if you're talking about shortening lives, I'm 34. I don't got a lot.
Trade you. Trade you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, in the past when we had it wasn't a work study, it was trying to think of the term we had for it, but all the information that was discussed there was not acted on. It was the purpose of getting everything together so that you could act on it in the next meeting. So it gave you the opportunity to discuss issues and work on things, but you didn't make any decisions. Kind of like what you do in a executive meeting. So it was a workshop meeting, so basically you had an opportunity to get as much information as you possibly needed during that period of time in order to make your decision at the regular council meeting, and they were shorter. So, but that's how it was. So you didn't actually do any kind of action.
So this is in lieu of the regular meeting, correct?
Mhm.
So, yeah. Mr. Bellis?
So that you could have the opportunity to really
Right.
get into the meat of it, and then
The next meeting, it would go fairly quick because all the
It's been
questions
discussed.
and stuff would have been answered.
Right.
And if you had additional questions during the period of time between that meeting, you can get your questions answered. So, yeah.
it will also give you an opportunity, if you're going to have a public hearing, as to whether or not the information was ready for a public hearing or not. So you could have that discussion at that time. Now, not one that becomes judiciary, but just a regular public hearing like we did on the budget, for example.
Might I ask, is there any objection by council to when we have the public comment section? For example, we've heard the same people at least twice, some people 3 times on the airport issue, that we could limit that?
I will get better at that.
I think part
Well,
of
one
it,
of the things you can do is let one person speak and who else is here in the same position, so that you don't get redundant, because it becomes redundant after a while. They're all having the same thing. And in some cases, I think they're just trying to wear us down.
doing a pretty damn good job.
Well, it's not an us and them thing. They're really looking for dialogue, and I think, Mayor Barrone, you hit on the solution, which is a public meeting, pro and con, where we can discuss as adults the issue. I do disagree with Mr. Bellis. I think if there are 100 people here who want to speak about an anti-box, what the mayor can do, and he knows they all want to speak. This is what Mayor Peralta may have done back in the day, or Mayor Duran, I forget. Limit it. How many people want to talk about the anti-box 200,000 square foot ordinance? 150 people? Okay. So we're going to go 1 minute each. Okay. So you could control it a little better. But I'll tell you, I do disagree with Mr. Bellis. If you start limiting the speech that way, even though it may be the same 2 or 3 or 4, you're going to ask for problems. It's going to look like a manipulation, and that's never good. One of the things this administration has done is to put out a huge message of acceptance, openness, and transparency. So what we could do, Mr. Mayor, is if you look out on the audience and see a bunch of anti or pro airport people here, limit it that way. Enough said. Good night.
Thank you. We have a motion to, do you have something, Councilor Cantu? Sorry.
so move to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Motion to adjourn. We have a second? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Good night.
Good night, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning. Is there a place